call to order the Conestoga Valley Board Work Session of January 10th, 2021. Do we have attendance, Mrs. Martin?
I have 8 members present, with Dr. Martin and Mr. Dillman joining us virtually on Zoom, and Ms. Trowbridge is absent.
And one prospective board member, right?
Correct.
Okay. Will you please join me to pledge the flag? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all of you to this meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. Could I have a motion from a board member, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nothing else, we have unanimous consent for that. Dr. Martin, would you take care of swearing in our newest board member?
Mark Gensel, would you please rise? Raise your right hand. I, Mark Gensel,
I, Mark Ansel,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
We have a full board again, finally. Superintendent's comments, Dr. Z.
Thank you, Madam President. I do have a few items of interest. First, I would like to congratulate our newest board members, Mr. Dillman and Mr. Gensler, because these gentlemen will be welcome and impactful additions to our board. And as you just mentioned, we are now ready to move forward as a full board of 9. Next up, we were notified prior to break that Calvary Church double booked our graduation night. Yeah, big ooze. Effort was booked for June 3rd, and Calvary booked us for the same night. As such, we needed to find another location or date and time. Dr. Smith, our high school principal, has worked diligently to find a solution. Through his efforts, and in order to maintain a tradition of holding the graduation at Calvary, he has worked out a solution to hold graduation at Calvary on Saturday, June 4th at 11 a.m. This will still allow family members who were originally scheduled to come into town for the graduation weekend to keep their reservations. It will also allow our graduates to enjoy the normal pomp and circumstance that graduation at Calvary entails, and ensures that the weather will not be an issue. I appreciate Dr. Smith's effort, as well as Calvary's work in trying to make it right for us. We will be informing the graduating class and families of the updated date and time through a series of informational notifications. Finally, as you were all aware, we had a snow day last Friday. As such, the next scheduled makeup day is Friday, March 18th. We will honor that makeup day, but shift the early dismissal from Thursday, March 17th to Friday, March 18th. So Thursday, March 17th will now be a full day for students, and Friday, March 18th will be an early dismissal for students. Additionally, the snow day did not impact the end of the second marking period or the scheduled clerical day for the high school. The last day of the marking period, that's only for the high school because they're on semesters, is still this Friday, January 14th, and there is still no school on Monday, January 17th or Tuesday, January 18th, with January 18th still being a clerical day for the high school. The first day of the second semester for the high school will remain Wednesday, January 19th, and we'll make sure to get this information posted as soon as possible as well. That's all for tonight, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. Other board comments? I would like to add one board comment more or less to the public. As the board tries to continue and improve its communication, we've noticed that a lot of people in the public prefer to get in touch with an individual board member, which is perfectly acceptable. Sometimes they send an email to the entire board. If it comes to the entire board, it falls on me as president to respond. And except for those rare occasions when there are more than you can possibly do in one day, we at least try to let you know that we received and considered it. There is one exception that has shown up that I want to make whoever is part of this aware of. If I receive an email anonymously or from a group with no individual name attached to it, I do not respond. So please, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, you do have to identify yourself, even if you're speaking for a group. That makes everybody's life a little easier. Other than that, we're going to move on to our student report. Mrs. Strasberg, it's all yours.
Good evening. So I guess since this is being videotaped, would it be appropriate for me to come up there?
Well,
or
just over
should I
to the
stand
side.
over
You're going to
here?
be using the,
We're gonna be using the
okay,
whiteboard
just as
for
long as you're not in the
the
way of that so
projector.
they can see it.
Okay. How about if I stand here? Does
That's
that seem
fine.
okay?
Sit down, be a board member.
I'll stand. So this year, Fritz Elementary put in place the safety patrol. It's not something that's new. You've probably heard about it for a long time, and there have been different iterations of it at CV, is my understanding, over a period of years. And so I'm gonna show a couple of different things and then talk about what it looks like at Fritz and why we actually brought it into place. So the safety patrol, a history, Taylor.
Patrol, a brief history. The AAA School Safety Patrol program. This program empowers students to provide safe pedestrian experiences for their peers.
You can turn it down and I can
The program has
explain
been
it.
recognized by
So it's been around since 1920. It is a program that at Fritz, we actually have parents or grandparents who have been around and have been a part of that. You can see there are several presidents who are a part of Safety Patrol, astronauts, Supreme Court justices, Olympic medalists, etc. And what it is it's a program that empowers students to take ownership and to be a part of the school in a way that's very developmentally appropriate for their age at elementary. And so we thought, with all the work that we're doing with the profile of a CV learner and with Character Strong and the character traits, that we wanted to find some authentic way to bring those opportunities to life at Fritz. So Mrs. Souders, who is our 5th grade teacher, she is helping with us, and we have 4th and 5th grade students who are a part of it. Every bus has 4 to 6 safety patrol members. We also have hall monitors, car rider monitors, and walker monitors as well. So we currently at Fritz have 47 students who are a part of Safety Patrol. And we have about 100 5th graders and 100 6th graders. That's about 25% of our 5th and 6th graders who are a part of it. We did an application process where they had to submit a little resume. They had to write why they wanted to be a part of Safety Patrol. They have to have grades of C or better that are checked each month. And they also have to have the bus driver, the cafeteria proctors, the recess monitors, and their classroom teacher sign off on kind of this check to make sure that they're modeling what a good Fritz citizen would be on the bus, in the cafeteria, all kind of areas. And so we've put that in place. We do this check-in throughout the month. You can be removed from Safety Patrol, and we told them you can also be fired. And we said this is like a real world experience where, if you do what you need to do, and if you don't do what you need to happen, then we have conversations. They lose their badge or their sash for a period of 2 weeks, then they have an opportunity to try again. So we want it to be a learning experience, but also to hold them accountable. So it's been going really well. The qualities of the CV learner that we really wanted to hit upon is, for the problem solver, figuring out how to handle, the safeties, for example, bring out the kids to the bus, the kindergartners, and there's one in the front and one in the back, and there's 8 or 9 kindergartners per bus, so they're trying to get them to walk correctly and stay on this side of the yellow line. And it's so funny to hear these 5th and 6th graders saying things like, I told you, how many times do I have to tell you? And it's this like little 11-year-old, talking. So helping them be creative, working with each other, a lot of partnerships, collaborating, working as teams, because there's bus teams. There's someone that sits in the front of the bus, somebody in the middle of the bus, and someone in the back of the bus. There's somebody who greets the kids when they get on the bus, when they get off the bus, someone who checks their badges. We train them. They all have different roles and responsibilities as well. Global citizenship, personal, civic, social, global responsibility, ownership of their school, responsibility for their bus, for the kids that are around, being safe, communicating with each other, and then also personal integrity, honesty, fairness, respect, ethics. So all of these things are really what we're seeing. What's really, really funny is that when we got the kids all together and we had the first meeting, and there's a pledge that they say, and then we got the sashes out. Collectively, there were like 55 kids in the room, they all went, ooh, like when they saw the sashes, and then we got the little badges out, and they were like, ah. And I got these emails from parents telling me that, they got up and they've worn their safety badge and sash all day on Saturday. And, pictures on Facebook about parents and grandparents and community members who are really proud because, they have their kiddos kind of, continuing that responsibility and understanding that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So what we have, the next couple of slides are some teachers and students talking about it.
I think that the safety program has had a huge impact on the school. I think that from my perspective, the older kids, it gives them a sense of responsibility and it allows them to use those character strong traits that we've been talking about all year long and really put them into action. And I see them taking our younger students under their wings and really going full force with the safety program. And likewise, our younger kids have older students who they can look up to as role models, and they have something that they can now strive for in the future if they want to be part of the safety patrol. So I think that that is amazing, and it also provides a great connection between the older students and the younger ones. My younger kids, they love seeing their safety patrol people in the hallway. Whenever they get off the bus, getting onto the bus, they're always waving at them and telling me stories about them. So I think it's a great connection that we have here as a building. So 2 thumbs up for the safety program.
Hi, this is Mr. Sean Campbell. I'm a 3rd grade teacher at Fritz Elementary, and I just wanted to say that I believe the safety program we have here at Fritz is just top notch. I love that the older kids have gotten involved. They take an ownership over the bus, over the other younger students, and the times that I've been out there for bus duty, I've loved watching them work with younger kids. Some of them are just amazing, and they get them lined up, they get their IDs ready, they're motivating the kids to be on time, to get on the bus, to have their mask ready. It's just been a really great program and something that I hope we can continue here at Fritz and something that the older kids look forward to as they grow up and go through the different grades here. I think it's just going great.
Well, I've been being a safety, I've learned that I have to communicate well with others. I work with the safety in the morning, and we have to communicate about what time other kids have to leave in the cafeteria when they're done with their breakfast.
She's a 4th grader. You have to click on Colin.
Being a safety has taught me how to look out for others and others' needs, and to be more responsible. It also taught me the importance of creating a safe environment.
Hi, my name is Nicole Baez, and I am the administrative assistant to Principal Trasborg at J.E. Fritz Elementary. And I just wanted to briefly share some of the benefits that I've noticed since we started the safety program at Fritz. One major benefit that I've personally seen is a boost in confidence that it's given our students to want to report things that they feel are unsafe to teachers and staff. And one thing that I always tell my own children is, if you see something, say something. And I feel that this program really helps our students to know what is unsafe, to know how to articulate to an adult what is unsafe. And I'm just really excited about the program, and I can't wait to see what it brings next. Thanks. Go Fritz!
Safety Patrol helps students grow because they learn to get like a lot of responsibility. Like things are up to them now. It's not just all up to the teachers. So I feel like it's a good way to gain responsibility.
So this is what the safety patrol looks like. You can see the sashes and the badges, and they come to school with those on and have to put them on at the end of the day. And like I said, we have about 47 to 50 kids involved in it at their stations. And these are the different bus groups. Those are maybe the hallway patrol. And you can see we have a wide variety of kids. Some kids we accepted into Safety Patrol with the hope that Safety Patrol would help guide them down a strong and responsible path. And it has really empowered a lot of kids. Some kids that initially we thought, you know, maybe this is an opportunity for you to like use your powers for good and not evil. And we've really seen some excitement from the kids. We also have monthly meetings with them, trainings and breakfasts with the bus drivers and with the safety so that they can work together as part of a team. We recognize that we have some areas that we need to grow in, but we feel as a whole it's been a really positive experience, and we thought due to COVID it might be easiest just to do the videos tonight. Normally we would have the kids here, so we appreciate your understanding with that. So thank you.
Any
Thanks, Michelle.
questions for Mrs. Strasberg? I remember, and I'm probably the only one in the room who does remember, the safety patrol was only in cities at street corners because everyone walked to school. And luckily, there is no photographic evidence, but I was one of them. On to our action discussion items. I'm sorry, skipped an important part. Public comments, forgive me. Is there anyone that would like to address the board? Yes, please. State your name and address, please.
I am Andrew Brooks, 46 Walnut Drive in Brownstown, PA. I'm a district parent, and I just wanted to make a brief comment about the proposed health and safety plan. I want to speak in favor of the upcoming revisions that will eventually be voted on, mainly in the sense that always keep it simple. As a board, for students, for parents, the best thing is keep it simple. Years ago, the old adage, stay home if you're sick. This does not have to be complicated. After reviewing the plan, I feel it's reasonable with adequate precautions without bending to hysteria and panic. We could put kids in biohazard suits and gas masks all through the school day, yet at the end of the school day, they're going to go to Sky Zone. They're going to go to Walmart. They're going to go to the Pennsylvania Farm Show. It's time to move on. Ultimately, we're all going to get COVID, and we've all either had it, will have it, or have it now. And that's ultimately how everything's going to end. But in the meantime, just keep it simple. Doesn't have to be complicated. Take reasonable precautions without bending to hysteria as you see on the news every night. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Okay, then we will move on to the business part of the meeting. We'll start with the action discussion items, and that's the change order for the Husky Middle School. Mr. Westerlund.
Thank you. I think I'm a new face to a few of you, so I'll introduce myself. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm Wesley Interline with Murata Man Architects. I am the project architect for the middle school that's under construction. So you will see me monthly, and I present either hopefully credits or change orders as they come up and detail what they might entail. So this month we have one, and I'm happy as I present these, as some of you know, interrupt me with questions. I give a brief summary and then an overview of where we are financially. We have one electrical change order. This change order reflects the cost associated with the addition of an additional electrical meter for the fire pump electrical service. This is an electrical change order, an electrical prime change order. With the incorporation of this change order, we are operating at a negative 0.07 rate, so just below even there. I'm happy to answer any questions. I will say, and this is true of all the change orders, this has been reviewed by the construction manager and the associated engineer, and myself, of course.
How did this need arise? Is this an omission or was there a change?
This is an omission, yes. This is a utility requirement that was omitted from the drawings, the electrical drawings.
Any other questions?
No, you asked my question, thank you.
If not, it will be on the consent agenda next week.
I think I'm staying.
Is that it? No,
Yep.
no, I know you're the next one too. Plan Con F, are you doing this alone or is Mr. Main with you tonight?
I think I'm doing it alone unless
Okay.
anything real curveball comes up, but yeah,
That's
hopefully.
okay. Go ahead.
I'll give a little bit of an overview for this as well. As I think everyone is aware, we are advancing 2 projects through the PlanCom process. The renovations of the existing middle school that will be the new elementary school to replace Smoketown, and Leola Elementary. The new Smoketown Elementary is approximately a month ahead in the design and bid process as Leola. So generally what will happen is you'll see me doing, for example, Plan Con F 1 month. I'll be in front of you next month doing the same thing for Leola. So what we have this evening is Part F. That is the submission of the bid permit or bid drawings and specifications for your approval prior to PDE submission. What we have done previously, for those not familiar with the PlanCom process, it's A through J, I believe. A and B roughly correlate to the schematic design submission. C is not applicable for these projects. It's required if property was purchased in conjunction with them. D and E is applicable to the design development submission. And then we have Part F, which is applicable to the final construction document submission. So this would be the final PDE review of the project prior to bid. And what you would see, what I will be in front of you next with is the review of the actual received bids from the contractors. And that is Part G. But right now we are at Part F.
On that document, may I ask, when you get down to the part of the document that's phased bidding, there are blanks. Is that because we haven't gotten to that part of it yet?
We shouldn't have any phased bidding with this.
Excuse me?
We shouldn't have any, it shouldn't be applicable for Smoketown.
Okay. I just noticed it was on the document, but we just sort of left it.
Yep, no, it's intentionally left blank.
Okay. Any questions from board members? If not, this will be on the consent agenda next month.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Board.
Thank you.
Item C, approval of the updated COVID isolation and quarantine guidelines. Dr. Z, I leave this to you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm waiting for it to download. I'll be right with it. Okay, we recently received updates from CDC and Department of Health regarding isolation and quarantine guidelines. Currently, we have isolation protocol for those who test positive. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Current isolation. Currently, we have, for those who test positive, faculty, your staff, or students, you isolate for 10 days. You're allowed to come back after the 10th day as long as you are symptom-free and have no fever, and that is without using any Tylenol or anything else. That's what's currently in place. CDC updated their guidelines on December 27th. It was nice of them to do it over the holiday break. The protocol then became stay home for 5 days, not 10 days. If you have no symptoms or your symptoms are getting better after 5 days, you can leave your house, continue to wear a mask around others for 5 days. But if you have a fever, you have to stay home until you're fever-free without medicine. So CDC started December 27th, Department of Health came through on December 30th. Again, over the holiday break. They were similar to CDC, isolated home for 5 days. And again, they talked about no symptoms or resolving symptoms. After day 5, you may leave the house provided they wear a well-fitting mask when around other people. So how does that affect us? Fortunately, our board-approved health and safety plan addresses some of these things. And CVSD will review any recommendations from the Department of Health, Department of Ed, or CDC, and determine how and if we can implement prevention mitigation efforts to the greatest extent practical based upon community and district needs. So what's this mean for our faculty and staff? Due to the impact of COVID on our faculty and staff, if you're out, currently you're out for 10 days. And there is a shortage of substitutes across the Commonwealth, not only in our district. So in order to keep that uninterrupted in-person instruction, we would like to implement the following guidelines for faculty and staff who test positive. We're looking at isolated home for 5 days, and day 1 begins after the first day of symptoms. So if I start feeling sick today, tomorrow's day 1. I've got to stay home for 5 days. On day 6, I can return to work as long as I'm feeling better or I have no symptoms and I'm fever-free without medication for 24. But when I return, I'll still wear a mask until after day 10. So on day 11, I can go back to mask optional. So what's it mean for our students? It's the same thing in that we want to get our students back to school as soon as possible. Not only for the academics, but also for the extracurriculars. Now, if you are COVID positive, there is a protocol that has to be followed before you can get back into full-fledged athletics. And that's been dealt with through the athletic department at the high school and the middle school for those students who are playing junior high or JV sports. So again, they will isolate for 5 days at home. Same thing, day 1 starts the day after you become sick. And then after day 5, if you're feeling better or you're asymptomatic, fever-free, you'll be able to return. Students should wear a mask then until after day 11. So instead of staying out for 10 days, we're only staying out for 5 days. Okay, here's where it gets a little tricky. And you probably have some questions, so I'll be ready for them at the end. Impact on household close contacts. That means if your brother or sister, your mom or dad is positive. Currently, if you're a household close contact, you need to quarantine for 10 days while whoever it is in your house has their current 10 days. And then you got to do another 10 days of quarantine. So if someone in your house is sick, you're basically out for 20 days currently. With the updated guidelines, if you are fully vaccinated, this is a key. So if you're aged 18 or over, fully vaccinated means that you have all the vaccine series plus the booster. Or you've had Pfizer within the last 5 months, Moderna within the last 6, J&J within the last 2. Or if you're a student aged 5 to 17, you have to have the full vaccine series of Pfizer, because Pfizer was the only vaccine that was available for those aged 5 to 17. So if you're fully vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine as long as you stay asymptomatic. So brother or sister could be in the house, you're fully vaccinated, you come back to school. But while you come back to school, you should do for 15 days wear a mask. But again, you don't miss any school because your brother or sister, mom or dad is COVID positive as long as you're vaccinated.
Is that a recommendation?
It is a recommendation.
Is a recommendation?
Should, yes.
Okay.
If the board wants to mandate, they can, you're welcome to do that. If you're a close contact and you are not vaccinated, this is where it gets a little tricky. You have to quarantine for 5 days instead of 10. Because remember, the isolation is only 5 days now. So you do the 5 days, and then you quarantine for 5 more days. So it's a total of 10 days instead of 20 days. And then when you come back, you should also wear a mask for additional 5 days after leaving the quarantine. So the 15 days total are the 10 while you're out, and then the 5 while you're in school, out of school, and then 5 while you're in school. Okay. And as it's stated in our health and safety plan, that we have reviewed the recommendations from CDC and Department of Health. And then, Mr. Talley, you said with the board's approval, the recommendations will implement the updated measures as presented. And we will make notifications and post them to the website. This is all, also, if you approve it, will be retroactive. So we have a number of students and staff who may be on day 7 right now, but we would call them tomorrow and they would be able to come back in because it's only after day 5. So there's gonna be some administrative work that we're gonna have to do, but we'll be able to get those students and staff back after day 5. We'll also notify those who are gonna go would have been past day 5, we'd let them know that they would be coming back after day 5. And we would do that tomorrow pending approval of the, of our recommended administrative application of the plan. So questions for me on how this works?
I have a quick question, as far as for the vaccination, not needing to quarantine then and stuff, according to CDC and stuff like that, it also has the option in there, or has had COVID in the last 90 days. Is that possible? The reason I'm asking that is, for instance, if you have a household, you know, let's just say two siblings, to make it easy, the one gets COVID, they both have to quarantine, and then they go back to school, and like a couple weeks later, like the mom or dad gets it or something like that, that child who just, you know, had it and was back for 2-3 weeks, now do they have to quarantine again, even though they just had it?
I will look that one up.
Okay.
Because I was not on the, that was not.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't think about it till now going over it, and because I know that they said I think it was 90 days if you tested positive for COVID, I mean, not just, you know, quarantine, you had to test positive for it. If you tested positive for it in the last 90 days, you would not have to quarantine either then.
I will check and see if that's there.
Just figure it might make it easier for households versus like, well, they just had it and now they have to quarantine again or something like that.
If that's part of the CDC or Department of Health recommendation, we'll definitely add it.
Okay.
If we add it, do we have to vote on this again, or we'll just automatically?
You can add it, you can make it contingent that if it is there, I can add it.
So if we have a motion, it's not only to accept this, it's with the understanding that it's retroactive, and that this particular clause would be added if applicable.
Okay,
So it's like a 3-part motion I would need.
okay.
Any other questions? That's good, thank you, good question.
Diane and Brad, are you, any questions?
Dr. Z, I have one quick question, and forgive my ignorance, but in the cases where there's a distinction between a vaccinated and an unvaccinated student, I'm assuming there's some process for proof of vaccination?
There would be for the quarantine student, if they were gonna come back as, and claim vaccinated, they would have to show. The same thing for staff as well.
Okay,
I find when they're,
thank you. That's the only question I have.
oftentimes when we're doing remote, we have to specifically let them know they can ask a question. Any other questions? If not, I will entertain that triple motion. I dare to try it. You remember all of it?
No, but you wanna hold my hand?
All right, well.
You can just move the triple motion.
Just what?
Move the triple motion.
That makes me have to say it, okay. Go ahead.
What do you want me to do?
You can say, I move as requested.
I move as requested.
Second.
There's a second. We have a motion and second on the floor to approve the change, make it retroactive, and to apply the extra clause if applicable.
Thank you, Idette.
Now, one thing we're going to do, we're going to have a formal roll call vote because it's much more efficient with some of us here and some not. So Mrs. Martin will call roll.
Mr. Benito,
Aye.
Mr. Talley.
Aye.
Mrs. Kapka,
Aye.
Mr. Dillman,
Aye.
Mr. Hurst,
Aye.
Mr. Gensel,
Aye.
Dr. Martin,
Aye.
and Mrs. Grawl.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
My pleasure. Policy review. I understand that Mrs. Heverly Fresher has a number of things on our agenda tonight, so she may as well come up and make herself comfortable.
Right.
Actually, we have budget review first.
So you want me to do budget first or policy
Oh, you're right,
first?
you're right. I skipped all that. We'll start with that.
That's an ode to the budget process. We're gonna try to skip it right away, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get through this agenda quicker. And is Mr. Johnson part of this part of it too?
Yes. All right, I will start with the, Dr. Z, if you want to pull up the preliminary budget PowerPoint, we'll start there. Awesome, thank you. So if you would go to the next slide for me, please. So I usually start this with the timeline so we can kind of see where we are and where we're going. So obviously today, the 10th, we're going to present a draft preliminary budget to all of you. And so you understand kind of what the process is that happens in the background is we put a budget memo out usually that the budget, we open a budget module up in our accounting system and put a memo out that sets a deadline that's usually around Thanksgiving for folks to put items into the budget for 22-23. Then it takes us about a month to kind of grab all that stuff and cobble it together to what you're going to see tonight. What that tells you, though, is that as we're trying to plan for a budget for next year, we don't have a lot of data going in. So if you think school starts the end of August, we've basically got September, October, and November data that we're looking at to build some of this stuff. So you will see as we go through this process over the next couple of months that the numbers are going to get updated and more refined as we go through, obviously as more data becomes available and we sort of add it into the process. So there are two paths to passing a budget in a K through 12 school system. And the most common path, which is the one that we have historically used, is the one that you have before you on this slide, where we're going to present the preliminary budget. There's some notice stuff that has to happen next week as part of the formal agenda to do that. We will come back with that preliminary budget approval for you in February. So the process that the state lays out is that budget needs to be what they call laid public or available to the public for a period of time before you all as a board vote on it. So it gives folks time to look at it, ask questions, all of those sorts of things. With the anticipation that mid-February meeting, we would adopt that preliminary budget. And then it's going to feel a little bit like we take this little break. I will tell you sort of like, when you think about the analogy of the duck floating across the pond and, paddling pretty hard underneath, that's what's going on here when it doesn't look like there's a lot of activity through that March and April timeframe. We are having a lot of internal meetings to do that drill down into the budget details. Staffing, as you're going to see in the presentation tonight, is a big component of that. So we'll be going through all of those pieces. And then the first step, which actually isn't on the chart because it's sort of a one-off, is we will come back to you in April with staffing for the next year. And then May and June become the proposed final budget and then final budget process. The other path that we can follow is basically and we would have to do it by the end of this month, by the end of January, to adopt a resolution simply to skip all that stuff in between and just say we are going to opt out of the preliminary budget process and we're going to pass a resolution not to go over the Act 1 index. Now you probably can't make that decision right now because you might not even know what the Act 1 index is, so we'll get to that. But I can tell you kind of historically the reason we followed this path as opposed to that path, as you'll see as we go through the slides tonight, there are a lot of unanswered questions that we're going to have. And by not passing the resolution, it doesn't mean that we can't still come in under the index. We can still do that. But the beauty of being able to go through this process, it's certainly more work on our end because we have to present the preliminary budget to you and then sort of go through all these intermediate steps. but it really protects us that if something strange were to happen, something that was unexpected, we're not sort of backed into that one corner. We have options available to us. So if the options were only ours, that would probably be a really easy decision. But certainly, you'll see as we go through, the state and the federal government have a role in our budget process. For us, actually much less than for other districts, but they still have a role. And so something that they can do can kind of make things a little difficult on us. So we've always sort of retained that right to give ourselves as much flexibility as possible. So Dr. you get the next slide. Okay, so the Act 1 index. So Act 1 was developed passed by the legislature around 2006, I believe. And its intent really was to make sure that there was a cap on how much school districts could raise taxes. And so I will tell you, if you go back and kind of look at the history before the index and after the index, you will see that there are districts that may have not raised taxes for a number of years. And then what used to happen is they would come back and they would need a more substantial increase in that third or fourth or fifth year because they didn't do something for a couple of years. So on one hand, it's sort of that balancing act of, people feeling like taxes are going up each year, but cost of living goes up each year. So if you can make a small adjustment each year, that's usually better for people's local budgets to be able to put that into their budget than to have a big peak or a big spike in a number, every 5 years or something like that. You're going to find that same thing after the Act 1 index, that there are districts that, and you're going to see even when you look at our chart, there are times when we have had a tax increase that's been higher than the index. There are times where we've had a tax increase that's lower than the index. And then there's times where we would come right in at the index. So gives more of the local control to you to be able to determine what you do in a given year, but take some of the local control away, and that if you decided you wanted to go to 5% in a year, and then as opposed to, a little bit incrementally each year, you actually cannot do that now. It also really flipped ahead on budgeting. What we used to do in the past was we would look at the expenses and say, what do we really need to make the operation work? And then sort of back into what the tax rate would need to be to cover that. Well, it's completely flipped that, because now I have to establish the tax rate up front to see how much money I have to work with. And then we sort of build the expenses on the flip side. I do have a quick question. You said that, we start this process and the state comes and gives us the information, when is that timing?
I will actually get to that. Yep, it's on the.
And I'm assuming that's for the special education where you have to wait for their.
Nope, that one should be attached to your board agenda tonight.
Okay.
The rest of the state budget will come, and I'll show you when that's going to happen. So the basic index, which actually gets set in September, the state publishes that in the Pennsylvania Bulletin for the next year, is 3.4%. You're going to see there's a spreadsheet that I also attached to, or had Mrs. Martin attached to the board agenda tonight. So for those of you who want the Cliff Notes version, you're going to want to pay attention to the PowerPoint. Those of you who love the numbers and want the detail, you can dive into the Excel spreadsheet and see where all of this comes from. And I'm more than happy, to go through it with anybody, collectively or individually in more detail than we're going to do tonight. But you will see, if you look at the summary page of that spreadsheet, that the index is projected to be actually a little higher in the coming years. And the reason for that is the index it's a calculation that is made up of something called the statewide average weekly wage, which is obviously the weekly wages across the state, and then the education consumer index. And those two combined have caused that number to be projected to be higher than it's been in the past, because wages are increasing in one instance, and then also with less numbers of people, the average or the wage of those people looks like it's higher, obviously because there are less people, makes an effect on it. So when you take that 3.4%, it's a pretty simplistic calculation in this one vein, where you take the rate and multiply it by the 3.4. It gives you the 0.4921 mils, would be what we would be allowed to go up. If you simply added that to the current rate, the new rate would be 14.966.
So as Mrs. Kapka mentioned, the special education exception. So there are really two exceptions that are available to us to be able to go above that index. There's a calculation for both of them. One is retirement, which is the state runs the school employees retirement system. PESERS is what we refer to it as. It was valuable to us to do that calculation, and I'll show you a chart on this as well, when the rate was increasing by leaps and bounds, because it looks back to a prior year to calculate the difference, to tell you whether you can actually apply for that index and what the value of it is. The good news is the rate is leveled out. The bad news is the rate's leveled out at 36%. So for every dollar that we're putting away for somebody's retirement, 36 cents on top of that is going into the retirement system for that person. Because it's leveled out, the percent change from year to year is not that great anymore, which has caused the exception to kind of dry up, would be the way I would describe it. So the only one that we have shown you, I think you'd have to go back 2 years to actually see the PESERS one. The only one we've shown you for the last 2 years is the special education exception. And that is because our special education costs, despite all the things we've been doing to make sure that we're taking care of the kiddos, but also keeping costs in line, those costs do tend to creep up year over year. So you can see the value of that one at 0.0674 mils. So it doesn't, make a huge difference in the millage rate, but certainly we'd be slightly over 15 mils if we added both of those, both the 3.4% and then the exception on top of it. So going to the next slide, so I try to give you some positives and then some, I don't want to call them negatives, but what some of the challenges we're going to be looking at are. So we actually, for those of you who've been paying attention to our budget for the last couple of years, we've been saying that real estate tax growth from an assessed value standpoint has just been flat, flat, flat. The last couple of years, we actually have seen a little bit of growth. That growth has averaged about 0.5% over the last 3 years, closer to 1% over the last 2 years, but still pretty nominal growth. And then we'll show you what the appeal situation looks like for folks who are appealing their taxes. And certainly we are in a position where all that growth or much of that growth can be eaten away by the appeals. So that's sort of the way it happens here at Conestoga Valley. The other big one, earned income tax. Now, earned income tax is a positive story. We're actually seeing, and part of it's due to, even though there have been job losses through the pandemic, the jobs that are left are paying slightly higher wages. So we are seeing an improvement back to a more typical trend in the earned income. So that's certainly a positive scenario for us. And if we go to the next slide, then we can talk about what some of the challenges are. So you'll see when we look at the revenue side, and I've said this before, there were some changes that happened with transportation during the pandemic, and so we're short a little bit of state subsidy there. I sort of said that was coming. I won't dwell on that one too much. The big piece that you're going to see when we get to the expense side of the budget is staffing costs for next year. And part of it's, a small portion of it is wages. So, our biggest area is our teacher's contract. That is a contractual 3% that we've planned for that group of folks. A much smaller group of support staff, but we try to make sure that we treat those folks, if not equal to the teachers, certainly close to that in pay increases. But what you're going to see in this budget are additional staffing requests. So when we were here in December, you had attached to the executive content of board docs 2 documents. One was kind of our normal request document where folks put requests in. The other one is the request to bring the new middle school online. So certainly moving 6th grade over to that new building, it's not quite as easy as plopping a 6th grade teacher out of the elementaries and just moving them. Back when we did the Act 34 hearing on the building, we had projected what that would be. Looking at it now a couple years later, we're thinking there may be some additional pieces, but we will be vetting that all as we sort of go through this, February, March process and bring that back to you in April. But that's a big piece. Our healthcare costs continue to be high. I will show you a chart on the special ed costs. And so really it's a combination of having some costs that we may not just have the details on yet, and other costs where we're over budget. So cyber charter would be an example where that's outside cyber charter tuitions. That's not our own virtual academy that I'm talking about there. And our hope was going into this year that we're sort of going into year 2 of the pandemic and things would calm down and we would see some of those students come back, and we have not seen that to date. And then certainly the construction and renovation projects as well. So assumptions for what's going into the budget. So we're going to do a modest increase in the assessed value. So I did about 0.75%. Again, that sort of makes sense with the ranges that I showed you. At this point, to Mrs. Kapka's question, so basic and special ed funding come from the state. And right now we're projecting flat. So when I said earlier, there are pieces that we just don't know. The governor's on task to do his budget at the beginning of February. So that's one of the pieces that we just don't have when we're going through this preliminary budget process. And it could be anything from flat to it could be, last year the governor tried to actually implement the full funding formula, which would get us the $9 million that Dr. Z likes to talk about. So we were all about that, but we sort of knew in reality that kind of ask was not going to happen, even though it would have benefited Conestoga Valley. And so we had budgeted flat. We actually, the state is actually on the exact same deadline we are to have their budget approved by the end of June. I will say we're just a little more quicker and more efficient than they are at the state. So a lot of times we have ours done and we're still waiting for them to decide. And that's exactly what happened last year. We kept the flat in because we weren't hearing a lot of movement about what was going to happen. And then we actually ended up getting a couple $100,000 more from the state than we had anticipated. So that particular piece can be very late in the process until we know it. But our first blush at what it will be will come early February. And then the federal funding, if you know anything about the federal government, I mean, they run from September to, or from October to September, so their budget year is completely off our budget year. So we're constantly sort of, in 2 budget years at the same time with them. Fortunately for us, the federal funding is pretty consistent. The big wild card there are the Esser funds. Last year at this time, we didn't know what that was going to look like. I mean, we knew sort of what the total amount that was passed by the feds in January was, but the rest of it was sort of yet to be worked out. I will show you some charts where we can clearly see what that's going to look like now that we've got our Esser plan in place. On the expense side, the assumptions I sort of already mentioned, the salaries, the PSERS rate gets certified in December, so that just happened a couple of weeks ago. Did come in a little bit under, it was 35, I think 0.6 was what they were projecting, so came in under, but still that's if you think about what you're putting away for retirement as a percent of your income, it's a significant number. And then the phased-in millage for the debt service, and that's about $300,000 is what we're phasing in. So Scott Kramer was here in December, talks to you about that last piece of borrowing that we're going to need to do to kind of complete at least the renovations that we have on the table. And so, as he said, we're putting that in periodically. So this Esser chart you've seen before, we have shown this one. This is not just all the ideas of the things that we're funding through Esser, and certainly that we talked about at the community forum in November, but it also shows you which year each item falls. And so if you look at the total supplement row and then the total supplant row, you are going to see those numbers reflected in that spreadsheet that I said that is attached to your agenda in board docs. Just as a reminder what those 2 terms mean. So supplement is just that, it's supplemental. It is items that are not currently in the Conestoga Valley budget. They're things that are going to be coming on top of. So we're going to budget for them on the revenue side and on the expense side. We're trying to be really careful that all of those items are things that we're going to do and then are one-time expenses that are going to go away because we don't have the money to sustain that going forward. So we need to be super smart about that. On the supplant side, it's essentially what you would think it means. We're supplanting items that are already in the Conestoga Valley budget. You will see those items are going to be less significant in dollar amount because we believe or at least are planning that as things change, we will be able to fold those funds back into the budget. So we are trying to use some of our ESSER funds to give some tax relief. In other words, not taking the tax increase up as much as we would have if we were not using ESSER funds for those items. The one last thing on this one is the items that are highlighted in red. And I apologize, that's a little hard on the eyes. Maybe I should have picked a different color. But what I was trying to draw your attention to is those are the changes from the last time you saw the chart. So if you wanted to compare it to the old one and be like, what's different about this? Those are the items that you want to focus on. And they are either items, in the case of the devices, that we decided we didn't need and deleted, which is why that one has a strike through, or items, as we've been working with Dr. Kozer and Dr. Mann, as Dr. Kozer's come on board and looked at some of the curriculum items that we need to do, and we'll talk about that when we get to our ESSER survey results, but seeing what ESSER funds we're going to spend towards that academic learning component. Okay, now we can go to the revenue piece. Sorry about that, Dr. Z. So I break this down in two parts, pretty easy, revenue and expenses, kind of like your home budget, income and expenses, stuff coming in, stuff going out. I think everybody probably knows that the three buckets for us are the local sources, the state sources, and the federal sources. And this is sort of a rolled up version. So again, it's kind of the Cliff Notes version. Anybody, again, who loves the numbers, we can sort of bury you in some detail with this stuff. That's not our intent. So we start at a high level, and as you need us to drill down, we can do that for you. I'm gonna, again, just hit a couple of highlights on this chart. So, I mentioned that the earned income tax number, which is about halfway down that first bucket at the top. And you're gonna see we were a little light with our budget this year because we just didn't know what was gonna happen. We were actually really light on this number in the 2021 budget, and the number did not decrease as much as we thought it was going to. So it came in around $5 million. But again, with the unemployment rate looking like it was, again, our projection a year ago was that number wasn't going to recover quite as nicely as it looks like it's going to at 5.4 million. And so we're taking that back to a kind of, I want to say maybe around a 3 to 4% increase, which is what we've seen historically. If you take out last year, which had the big bump coming back out of COVID, it looks like around if you include that year, it's about 4%. If you don't include that year, it's about 3% year over year. So that's one big portion. Down under the state sources, you'll see the flat going from current year estimate of the basic ed subsidy to next year. And then the last piece, just to focus on this one, is if you go down to the just above the total revenue line, you'll see the ESSER funds running around $1 million, and next year we're going to show you we're going to spend about $8 million of that money. So what all drives that? I mean, we've talked before, the local sources. So at CV, we are really, the good news is we're really in charge, right? Because a lot of the money comes from the local sources. The bad news is that means the state and feds aren't giving us as much as maybe another district of similar size to us. So then it's on the back of our taxpayers to make up that difference. So Dr. Z, if you go to the next slide, you'll see the assessed value history. And so I said there was a little bit of an improvement in 2021. This chart only goes out to 2020. So when we see that new bar added on, you'll see a little bit of a tick up, but it just illustrates how truly flat our assessed value is. So if you had a nice slope to that, we probably wouldn't be raising taxes as much because each incremental year of more assessed value would sort of carry the day. When we're flat, one of the numbers has to go up. So in our case, it ends up being the millage rate that goes up. On the next slide, you'll see the tax assessment appeals.
Yeah, we had reassessment in 18, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. So the big jump that year was the reassessment year. I should have mentioned that. Thank you, Dr. Z. The next one shows you the tax assessment appeals. So we have a policy on this. So there's this thing called the Uniformity Clause in the Constitution that says that we can't pick on any particular type of tax or type of taxpayer. So we have a threshold that we have set. We look at any tax that comes in that's over $500,000. So you'll see there's one there. I took the name off and just called it residential because I was trying to protect the individual taxpayer there. But it could be, so we had a residential one last year as well. They ended up withdrawing, so that one I actually took off. But periodically they could be fairly sizable properties of residential size, or for the most part, they tend to be, business and industry types of properties. So the ones in green are the ones from last year, and you can see that the County Board of Assessment granted decreases on many of those. So you'll see on the far left, we are appealing those. They are in the court system right now, and it just takes a while for all that stuff to work through. So I don't have any updates to give you. If there would be a settlement or something on one of those, we'd bring it back to you, and the board would actually have to agree to that settlement that we would work out.
How often do those appeals settle in favor?
How often do they settle in favor?
Right. Of us?
I would say they frequently settle at a compromise.
Okay.
Is usually where. So it's a process.
Still less than what it was initially.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's a process of, we'll go in, and it sort of depends on who's driving it. If they show up at the assessment appeal hearing, the initial hearing at the Board of Appeals with an appraisal, we request a copy of that, and one of the first things we'll do is have somebody just do a review, like a book review appraisal of it, and be like, does this make sense? And sometimes they'll tell us, don't even bother fighting it, because you're gonna spend legal fees and you're not gonna get anywhere because the property really is overassessed. Okay, that makes sense, so we try to follow that guidance. Versus times where we have one right now that we actually had the appraisal done on it, and the appraisal is higher than where it came in at, so we're gonna be pushing on that one. You will see the difference between the last year and this year is that the County Board of Appeals actually held on a lot of those, which was good news. I mean, that hasn't happened, I don't think, since I've been here. Typically, when a taxpayer goes in and they make a pretty strong case, the Board of Appeals grants it, and then we're sort of trying to play catch up. This year they held firm. And I think they did that because many of them were claiming a COVID related reason. And like everybody, that's a can of worms, everybody could kind of claim that, right? So in those ones, you'll see the status, the taxpayer is actually appealing it, not us. We were sort of happy that they didn't get another decrease, and so we're going to end up, going through a bunch of those ones as well, and it'll be interesting to kind of see. But I'll be kind of giving you updates as we get more information on those ones as they transpire.
I would add that often the balance is what it would cost us to fight the appeal, as opposed to how much we're going to get off of it. And both sides know what those numbers are.
Yep.
Yeah.
So sometimes we come to a compromise simply because it's just taxpayers' money, and we're not going to spend it just for the principal.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that's you have to kind of keep in mind with these appeals, it's sort of, and this isn't, it's just an additional layer to what Mrs. Graff just said. The one at the top, the 4,000 one's probably a bad example, but maybe one that's, $20,000 or $30,000. You kind of think, well, do I really want to go after that one? But remember, that's $20,000 or $30,000 every year until it reassesses again. So sometimes we get stuck on the one number because I'm just calculating it on the number that we know. What we don't know is how many years before that property will be reassessed and what that total number will actually be. So that's pretty.
And that's what, like last year, we were 400,000.
Yep.
But 400 rolls over every year, we're 400 short every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if we could hold this year, come in at about 135,000, which would be nice, but we're gonna try to make some of that 400,000 up from last year. We'll see how that plays out. So again, you've kind of heard, again, Mrs. Kapka, I probably should have said this when you asked me about the state budget. One of the other things that I will do after the governor announces what the budget is I'll put some Cliff Notes version together and bring that back. So anybody who wants to read the state budget and go through it, you're more than happy. I'll point you in the direction of a lot of resources, but I'll do that for you as well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that tonight because there's nothing to tell. So that's really the local side is looking, or the revenue side is looking at the local piece. Then on the expense side, and I sort of do this one a little bit differently. So in the other one, I'm breaking down, local, state, federal, and kind of doing it by area. Here, I'm kind of doing it by what we call object, or what you may think on the business side as, the area of the budget that you're looking at. We can also run this a completely different way. So if you said, tell me how much is in instructional expense, meaning how much is literally tied to classroom instruction versus how much is all the support stuff that we do, meaning, buildings and grounds, those sorts of things. And then there's sort of another area that's, community services and some other pieces. But I can run it a different way and kind of show you the instructional versus the support side as well. But that's kind of, I think, hard to kind of wrap your head around. This, I think, is more what traditionally people are thinking about is what is the stuff. So this is the way we typically show it to you. And sure enough, as I said earlier, you're going to see in that salary line item a really big jump to the budget next year. And that's really derived from those two charts that you saw, or those two proposals that you saw in December. I don't need to get into the details of that tonight, but obviously then when your salary numbers go up, things like your Social Security contributions, your retirement contributions, and even your group health insurance all go up with it. So that top half of that is sort of all tied together. And then just a couple of notes towards the bottom. So if I ever kind of get done talking, Ken's going to talk to you about the capital items. So you see the area called purchased property services has a pretty substantial increase to it. So that increase is tied to the items that Ken discussed in December that are capital project types of items all go into that category. So you see about an $800,000 difference there. It's about 750 of it's off of the list that Ken's going to ask for some approvals for tonight. Just to back up 1 second, so the purchased professional and technical services tends to be contracts that we have. For example, the special education contract that we have, not only with the IU, but with the other districts around us that help us provide those services are in that big bucket. Student transportation, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Tuition is also probably self-explanatory. The biggest component there is going to be the CTC. And then certainly the cyber charter tuition costs that we pay out. Other purchase services are just what that says. Other services that we purchase. For us, the two big categories are going to be the SOS contract and the STS contract. SOS is the provider that we use for, close to 200 support staff folks, cafeteria, food service, instructional aides, and STS is where all of our teacher substitutes come from. So those are two pretty big components there. General supplies. General supplies is not what you would just think of as books and paper, because that'd be a lot of books and paper and, well, books is actually a different one, but paper and pencils and those types of things. Things like technology supplies get put into that one. Our virtual academy, the CVVA, has a subscription that comes with it to provide that service through K-12, which is the vendor, and that is actually in the supply category. Energy is what you would think, books I already mentioned. Equipment looks a little bit light, but it's because we did a significant purchase in the 2021 year to get ourselves up on one-to-one devices. And so what you're really seeing there is the lease payments for the other equipment. And then down at the bottom, the biggest item that you'll see there is fund transfers to debt service, which is the mortgage on all the stuff that we're renovating and own and buy. And then the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see Esser Reserve, and that's going to be the money. Remember I talked about the supplement? That's going to be the supplement piece. So we're sort of plugging, for right now, so we can show it to you, we're plugging it in there so you can clearly see what we're doing. It ties back to all of those ideas that I listed on that other chart, and then eventually we'll sort of roll everything in and it'll be there. The next series of charts, I am not going to go through in detail, so to the relief of some of you, but I do want to tell you what they are so you know what you're looking at if you go back and take a look at them. So these charts come out of a software package we have called Forecast 5. A number of districts in the IU use it. It not only gives us historical data, but it also enables us to compare ourselves to other districts really of a similar size or other districts within the IU. So if you want to say, hey, what do the other Lancaster County districts look like on this particular cost? Just let me know and I can go in and run that and share that information with you. But for our purposes tonight, I'm showing you really just Conestoga Valley numbers. So this is the retirement cost one. So remember when I said, yeah, it leveled out at 36%, but it's still 36%. It wasn't 36% forever. 10 years ago, we were only budgeting about $1 million in that line item. Now, obviously, we're budgeting over $9 million in that line item. So that just goes to show you the significant increase in that cost. And it's actually amazing if you think about it, that we have been able to do that without increasing taxes more than we have, because that one's been a big driver. But each of these charts I'm going to show you is going to be the historical one, and then it's going to be followed by the next one, which is what we call the cost to the subsidy. So we do get cost back from the state as a subsidy for the retirement system. And so what you see here is the orange bar gives you the total cost. The gray bar that's much smaller shows you what the subsidy is that we get for that. And so then the number that's in the far right-hand side is the difference, and it's a negative because we're not, the subsidy, the revenue that we're getting in is not keeping up with the expense that we need to put on the budget side. So you'll see that. And then in the retirement one, I'm going to also show you a projection. So that other chart, if you noticed, it ended in the 21-22 year. I want to be able to show you what it looks like going forward. And so this one shows you the bar chart of the cost going forward, and then the line is what the rate looks like going forward on the axis on the right-hand side. So again, next one, healthcare, same sort of thing. This one shows you the history. You can see that we did change our health plan a number of years ago in cooperation with the union. We went from a really Cadillac indemnity PPO plan into a qualified high deductible plan. And that has, I mean, we've had some bumps there, but it has definitely kept our costs in check. The next one that you're going to see is going to be that, again, that projection one that I want to show you where it looks like we're going forward. And this is a neat chart in that you can really see, we left the old numbers in there so you could see before we went from, when we went from the PPO plan to the qualified plan, what our costs were projected to look like. And, you know, fortunately, as much as the cost going up maybe doesn't sit well with your stomach, the fact that, you know, it's going to take us till 25, 26 to get where we potentially could have been in 1920, chart doesn't look so bad. Next one then, special education costs. I talked about this one already, so similar chart just showing, and the funding from the state has been super static on this one. I mean, that's pretty obvious if you look at those gray bars on the left. Our costs continue to go up and we're not keeping up. And then the next one shows you CV's numbers. So this is the line chart of what our costs look like going up. And then the final one in this grouping, I'm sorry, I lied. The next to the final one in this grouping is the cyber charter tuition, and you can certainly see where we came from pre-pandemic to where we're at now. As I mentioned, I think we were around 96 students last year. Again, we were hoping that we would have some of those students come back. That has not happened. I think some of that's related, and Dr. Mann can speak to it better than I can, but related to the pandemic just still being ongoing. So we're seeing similar costs this year. I think we've brought the number down to about 88 or 89 students, so not a lot of movement there. And then the final one is the net debt service, which again is something that Scott covered with you last month. But one of the things, we sort of have a little joke here. I'm married to somebody who works in cardiology. He does not like flat lines. I do like flat lines because it means I have a very consistent budget. And so as our debt was dropping off, one of the things that we tried to do was make sure that we rolled the new debt on to what we call a wraparound debt, meaning the new debt wraps around the existing debt and makes that nice consistent line. So we have that debt service in place, but we don't have big peaks and valleys in that that are going to cause budgetary issues. So at the end of the day, bottom of the line, and again, you'll see these numbers on the Excel spreadsheet as well. When we put all the numbers in, we're about $5.6 million short of where we need to be. If you allowed us to go to the full index, which is way too early to make that decision, but I'm just showing it to you for argument's sake. About 1.7 is what our millage rate would generate for us with that additional 0.4921, gets us down to just under 4 million. We have had this history of using some of our fund balance, so some of our savings. And the reason, or the way I arrive at those numbers, the 450,000 and the 150,000, is we sort of look at the percent or the dollar change in the costs each year. And we estimated off that. So that PSERS number is going to go up about, it's actually a little over $400,000. But I just left it at 450 for argument's sake. So at the end of the day, we're looking at about being $3.3 million short. So that's going to be our work. When you think we're taking a little pause, we're not. We're working on getting that number down. The next question is, how are we going to do that? So next slide tells you sort of the areas that we're going to review. So certainly, I've said it a couple of times, those two staffing lists are like first on the docket to be looked at. Because frankly, there's some stuff on there that I could just tell you, like, that's not going to happen, that's not going to happen. But there's a bulk of it that really needs to be vetted through a process of, does it align with district goals? What do we need? All of those sorts of things. Profile of a learner, our comprehensive plan. We got to sort of hit all those pieces. So we'll be going through that process. And then we actually have a series of budget meetings here internally where people come and I'm going to call it kind of like defend their budget. You know what I mean? It's sort of like a dissertation defense. We sort of walk them through the paces, and it just means we get to ask questions and we dive into the details. And throughout that, we will find things that like, oh, we don't need that, or this is double counted, or we can do that next year, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes we take things and we split them. We'll say, you know what, we can't do all of that next year, but we'll do half of it next year and half of it the following year. So all of those negotiations happen for us to come back to you in May with a proposed final. And then Dr. Z had already sort of mentioned, with the new middle school coming online, we may have to look at some redistricting of some attendance lines, certainly retirements. So the retirement deadline for our professional staff is 4 months prior to the end of the school year. You'll see a bunch of those on the agenda for next week. And so that says something to us like, oh, do we still need that position? If we do, or are we replacing it? Can we move somebody? We sort of figure all of those pieces out. And then if all else fails, when we get down to the end, we sort of have a list of items that are like, okay, here are the really hard, gulp and swallow kind of things that we might not want to touch, but we definitely have had a list of those because we've had to touch it from time to time. So back to what I had said earlier, the reason we're on this preliminary budget path is because we have a lot of unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen with those assessment appeals. We'll find out in February what the state budget situation looks like. And then through the next couple of months, we're going to be collecting data. So not only will we take that 3 months of data that we have, now, actually by the time we get to next week, we'll have December closed out and we'll be able to have, okay, now we got December under our belt. But each month that we go forward, we'll have another month of data to look at and see where we are. Our healthcare renewal happens in the spring. Special education, the IU, which is the biggest component of that, does what's called a mid-year report, which usually comes to us the end of January. We'll continue to watch those cyber charter tuition numbers. Unfortunately, I've heard from a couple other districts as we're going into the second half of the year, their numbers are going up, which is a little concerning. I thought we were good there. And then one of the big components is going to be, as we again start to look at bringing that new middle school online, we're going to need to look at transportation for that. And so that could change our transportation contract numbers as well. So that'll be the work ahead of us, and the last two pieces, really the last piece that I leave you with, because Mrs. Graff always asks us, what does that millage rate equate to? And I just use that average single-family residence. It's a number that comes off the county land use report. So, it could change if I used a multifamily residence or, some other property, but I use that one as a benchmark. If we were to go to that whole 3.4%, it certainly would take a tax bill of that size up another $100. And I can just tell you that, from an administrative standpoint, you allowing us to have that flexibility does not by any stretch of the imagination mean, hey, we got a free ride to 3.4%. That's not the way we function here. It's not the way we budget. We consistently try to bring that number in as low as we possibly can. Sometimes, we're at, 2% and you might want to be at 1.9, and we'll try to see how we can get there. Other times, we may be at 2% and you say, man, you started at 3 and you got this to 2, and we don't really want it to be 2, but we can understand with all the goals and the things we need to do why it needs to be at 2. So we'll be walking through that over the next couple of months, and I will take any questions that you have. If you don't have any, don't fear. You have all week to take a look at these numbers. Call me with questions. We'll try to, if there's anything that you ask that, needs to have more information, we'll bring that back to you next Monday. But our plan would be to come to you also next Monday with the appropriate resolution and notices. A resolution that you need to pass to agree to do the preliminary budget, and then the notices that we need to publish publicly so that everybody knows that the budget's there and available. The other thing that we will bring back to you, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, the other thing that we will bring back to you next week is every school district in the state is required to submit their budget to the Department of Education on what is called the PDE 2028 form. And it is, it's just that, it's a state form, and if you pulled up ours and Elanco's and South Allegheny and Pittsburgh, you could lay them all out and they're all the same form, and you can sort of follow the numbers from any of the 500 districts. And Adele was working on that, so we will have, again, if the spreadsheet sort of makes you glaze over, we'll have it in the official PDE format for you next week as well.
Are we all breathless?
I am.
I will mention one thing. For those of you who may be spending, giving more attention to the governor's budget presentation than you usually do, don't get excited. He's only the governor. That's what he would like to do if he could do it, which he can't. So it's the legislature that are the ones that'll tell us what they're going to do with that. And they've been pretty good. It's been a while since they missed their deadline. That used to be more common when, although we have a requirement, and there are consequences if we wouldn't pass our budget. The state sort of passes it when it's darn well good and ready, and there are no consequences. But it's been a long time since they've done that. They've been pretty good, even if they made it within a day or two.
Yes,
But that's what, June?
Yeah, end of June.
Yeah. So,
The benefit of us having
this
like
is why it's so hard, because we have no idea what they want to do.
the benefit of us having a property tax that means we're sort of cash flush in July, August, and September is one year it took them 9 months to pass the budget. And we didn't have to worry. I mean, there were districts that were going to have to go out and do revenue anticipation notes to get themselves into the year, and unfortunately we didn't have to do that. So.
And if they weren't getting, if the state budget wasn't passed, they couldn't cut checks to those schools.
Correct.
Or
So
pay
we weren't getting
teachers.
subsidy. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So.
All right, well, if you have no questions about that, again, I'll turn it over to Ken for the review of the capital projects. This isn't really going to be a review because we already reviewed it in December. What we're really asking for tonight, Ken's going to call out for you the items that we are going to request for you to approve next week for us to go ahead and bid. This is not a mistake. These are the 22-23 items. And the reason that we're asking for a request for approval to bid them before we even have the budget done is because we're trying to get ahead of the summer crunch with some of the project stuff. So we found that if we wait until the budget gets passed, we can't get bids on the street and requests back in workers on site to get the stuff done over the summer. So we do sort of have to put this a little bit ahead of the normal process.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. So Ken Johnson, Director of Operations. Last month, as Phyllis had indicated, we had gone through everything. I know, Mr. Gensel, you weren't here to see that, but if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. The items that I'm looking to get approval to bid would be, Dr. Z, if you go to the next page would be great.
There we go.
Yeah, we're gonna start with on the high school, the exterior insulation finish system, the recoating of that. And again, that's something that we'll put out to get multiple bids in to get that pricing. The installation of the metal wall panels, we're gonna combine that with the metal wall panels at the greenhouse on the next page as well. So again, that would be combined into one package that would be bid on. We had talked about it, really the bidder on that IFAS would not be bidding on the wall panels. So two different contractors would look at that. So that's why we're separating those into two separate bids. And then obviously the renovation of the running track, that's one that we want to bid out to get the best bids as possible. And then also the roof replacement for the varsity baseball field. So that one I'm not as concerned about. The running track is definitely the one, and the IFAS and then the metal wall panels. Those are the ones I want to make sure we have somebody locked in. So when we hit that summer break there, where we can hit the ground running on those. Because what we've seen on a lot of things is, lead time on materials and just bidder interest as well. So if we can lock somebody in now, relatively soon for something, in the summer, then I'll feel a lot more confident about it. I've been hearing a lot of word on the street on shortage of materials and lead times are just been some crazy numbers. So it hasn't impacted us with our projects, which is good. We were kind of on the early curve of that.
And it's availability of materials.
Yeah. Our bigger impact seems to be availability of manpower to do the work. So, and the other item that I had looked to bid would be the dump trailer. The maintenance truck, the power brooms, passenger van, I can get those through state contracts. I haven't found anybody that can provide a dump trailer through a state contract, so I would have to bid that out. So.
Any questions?
I just have a question, Ken, how about what Mrs. Kappa asked you a couple weeks about those door locks for those, you said you were gonna look into,
I ordered 2 samples and they're on their way and we're gonna try them out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are we sure about the track? That's half your budget right there, half your cost.
Yes, I'm very sure about the track.
Yeah, so we've brought up before in any athletic presentations, never been brought up?
It's something we've been monitoring since we did the stadium work and project in 2014. I've had the gentleman that comes out and does the turf cleaning and conditioning for us every year and also does the GMAX testing. I have him look at it and monitor it and see what's going on and he really doubts that we can get another year out of it. The budget that I put in there is a resurfacing of it. It basically puts a whole new coating over top of it. So we get a brand new track out of it that'll give us a lot of life. The alternative to that is basically tearing all the rubber surface up, getting down to paving. We'll possibly have to redo some of the paving because some of that paving might come along with the rubber. And so now you got paving costs, so the cost will be more than twice of that. So, yeah.
I'm not sold, but that's okay.
Yeah, I don't want it to get to the point where we have to do that. I'd rather do this as a solution.
The other thing that we can do, and we've done this in the past, so let's say we get to a point in the regular budget where we're about $330,000 off, and we can we've
Look
got
at
the
it, we
3
just
million
put it
in
again.
capital that we could move this one to. That one's big enough, Mr. Talley, we can
Yeah.
move that one to the capital budget instead.
Okay.
Yeah,
If that
sometimes you're in a
helps.
pay me now or pay me
I know,
later.
I get it.
And
It's not a roof, it's not,
Because we float along for years, especially when we build a new facility or
Right.
something. And you always have to remember, somewhere at the end of that dream is maintenance and replacement.
Do you know, just last question, when it comes to a resurface of something like that, I imagine there's a limit of how many resurfaces you can do anyway. So is he saying like,
There are.
this is the ultimate Band-Aid for 10 years and then at that point they have to tear the whole thing out?
Ultimate Band-Aid, but I don't wanna call it a Band-Aid.
Okay.
It's a viable solution.
Okay.
Yeah, and when I talked to the professional that I've spoken to about it, yeah, we looked at all the alternatives, and this is definitely he feels this is the best solution for the conditions that we have currently. If we let it go any longer, and push it another year or 2 years, we're looking at, it needs to be torn up and completely replaced, and then we're at a much larger bill to foot.
At some point, are we looking at where these big ticket projects are and how far out they are?
Yes.
I know it wasn't as successful as we had hoped, but we once entered into a capital project. And if we're facing a really big ticket item, the time to start that capital project is before you have to actually do the project. So if we're less than 5 years out, now's the time to think about how we're going to fund that and whether or not there is an alternative funding and fundraising that can be done that would slowly help us get there. Don't
Yeah,
want to be
usually
blindsided.
Yeah, usually my larger projects are roofs.
I'm
And-
sorry.
Usually my larger projects are the roofs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
But they're not the only ones.
No, they're not.
no.
But that's definitely where we look at the 5-10 year,
Yeah.
the plan on
But in
those
this,
things.
unlike groups, there are other funding sources we can try. We don't usually raise money to replace roofs, but we do raise
Yeah,
money
we
to
do.
help with extracurriculars.
Mhm.
Now, the resurfacing, it'll last us for however many years, but then at that point, would we have to look at funding the whole tear out, or would it?
That's a question I will ask
Okay,
the professional that I've had look at it. Yeah, just to get clarification. I'll have that clarification for you for next Monday then.
okay, thank you.
You wanna know why some people leave their school boards?
Yeah.
That would be the hope, yeah.
Yeah.
And just how long he proposes that
Mhm.
resurfacing
So
will
like, we have
last.
8, if that lasts 3 years or
Right.
5 years.
Because the other one was 2014, so I figure we'd like to get maybe more out of that.
If you remember, we do have a priority that we used to have it required, but it still lasts. We looked at things that, the return on investment, if it's safety, it has to be done right away. Would it cost more if we put off this repair? So some things you put off the repair, you can sort of squeak through, some of them will, mushroom on you. And I think they continue to apply those priorities to make sure that, with energy saving or whatever, to make sure that we find that very narrow path that becomes financially most expedient. It's worked so far. Any other questions? Okay, if not, we will move on to the robotic storage cover.
Yes, and this, we presented to you in December, we wanted to have it approved at the second meeting and it just didn't make the agenda. So we're asking for approval for this one because this one would be for this current year.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, a quick question on that. As far as is this anticipated to cut any cost of anything? Or
It's
it's just an additional expense?
It's anticipated to help us with staff openings that we have.
Yeah.
So we have positions that we can't fill. And obviously, when you look around the economy, we're not finding the bodies, it's not like
Yeah.
we can't hire them, the bodies literally aren't there, that we would be able to have some automation that would mean we wouldn't have to worry
So
about
you're
those
saying this would
open
take
positions.
the place of hiring somebody that we would
Correct.
otherwise need to?
Yeah.
Correct.
A position that I haven't been able to fill.
Okay.
So my question then becomes, when the bodies do become filled, what happens to this? Does it just get shoved in the closet somewhere? and never seen
No,
again?
once we automate this, I think we go down a position and
Okay.
then the
It could
position
be a-
just goes away.
Yeah, it could be a
That would-
position, could be a head
And we'll find,
position.
this is a pilot for us, so we're gonna do one and see how it works now. One of the other local districts is a little bit ahead of us, they have theirs, and they said, you know, our hesitancy in this stuff is always, is it really as good as everybody? And they're like, oh no, like, this is really helpful, like, okay, all right, so our intent was to get one and see how it goes, and so if things work out and we still can't fill bodies, we may come back and ask you to fund a second one. But for right now, we just wanna try it, dip our toe in the water, and then we can report back to you and let you know how it's going.
Yeah, that was my second question. This has been, you have talked to somebody who
Yes.
has this and
Yes.
it actually
Yeah.
works out well. It's not broken every other day or something like that.
No, and the company that is, has developed this technology, they're a well-known company, it's Tenant. And, we have multiple machines from them, they've just incorporated this automation onto, in a sense, an existing machine. So it can still be ridden and driven manually around, but that's defeating the purpose.
Right.
Obviously, you have to move it from point A to point B to get it to start, you know, for your automation side of it. But really, it's, we've been looking at all alternatives right now for staffing. So I've had my maintenance guys helping out with custodial services. I've helped out in the evenings doing wherever I can. We've gotten some bus drivers to help out a few hours here and there, and even some of the food service staff will help out, you know, where they can on the custodial side of things. But it's not consistent, and I'm trying not to burn everybody out either. And, you know, in our high school, it's the building that doesn't sleep. There's so much activity going on in there all the time. There's, you know, whether it be the evenings, weekends, you know, sporting events or concerts or whatever. We always need staff in that building, and if somebody can be off doing other things, cleaning in a classroom, cleaning bathrooms, this can be out doing the hallways and taking care of something that, again, needs to be done. But if they don't have to be doing it other than starting the machine, making sure it's got water and cleaning materials in it, then they're off, you know, being more productive and basically doing the job of more than one person at a time.
If I remember correctly, you said about using it in like larger areas and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So especially our.
It's not like it's only going to be beneficial in one room and that's it.
No, it's, look at it, the corridors, the cafeteria, the gymnasiums, you know, those spaces. I don't see taking it into individual classrooms, just because.
Right, but more than just cleaning the gymnasium and then
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah.
Do they have any estimated maintenance costs annually, other than, I saw it was $15,000 for the software?
The software is the primary thing. We've had good success with our other tenant machines, so they're a proven animal for us. Pretty much batteries will eventually, you know, start to wear down. So, but they'll last 18 months, 2 years, you know, on a battery that we maintain. So
Do you know what the warranty is on, like it says, 3-year software subscription? Is that including like a warranty on it, you know? If there's any-
the machine itself has a warranty. As far as the subscription, the software is, that's a subscription that's constantly getting updated.
Okay.
And it includes a cellular service in there too, because it will send you, if it gets stopped or runs out of water, or for some reason somebody hit the button, thought it was like, that's a fun thing to do.
Right.
So it'll alert somebody that it did that. So it includes also with the software subscription as a cellular notification system.
Okay.
So it's always updating, and you can pull up its, you know, its pathway to see what it had done.
Will they offer a fleet discount? So if we end up having 10 of them, it's like 15,000
That's a good question.
I'm not sure, I
Yeah,
understand
what does?
Walmart bought a large quantity of these, so I'm guessing they probably got a little bit of a discount, but from what I've seen, their tenant has set the pricing on this as just, that's what it is, and, you know, and really, it's not so much a machine cost, it's more the subscription.
Cost.
Yeah.
The data collection, okay.
Yep.
Just a quick general, do they happen to have like an upgrade trade-in program? Cause if it's like 3 years down the road and they have this new model out,
They have two different models right now. They have, I think it's 20-inch width and a 24-inch width. So are they gonna be developing into something different at some point in time? Possibly. But right now, they look to be sticking to standard width machines that already exist.
okay, so like in 5 years, we can, but would they give us hey, we got this new model, if you give us your old one?
Yeah, you never know if they'll do a trade-up program
Because I
or
know we
not,
already have
yeah.
some other stuff, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've gotten good life expectancy out of the equipment we've bought from Tenet over the years. So all of it's still working and operating, so.
I understand you seem to have great confidence in this particular company.
Yes.
Do you look elsewhere at all?
There is another brand out there, but I have not heard good reviews.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket at any given time, so I always try to research, you know, who else is doing this and who else is out there. The other ones, although they have it, they don't seem to be
Same quality.
at the same quality or the same level with the technology. Yeah.
Okay.
Last question would be, because I know elementary school kids will ask this because everybody loves Giant because of theirs.
Is it?
Do they have googly eyes that will sit on the front of it?
I'm sure we could put googly eyes on it, yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most important thing.
It actually has sensor, it's a ride-on machine, so it actually has a sensor on the seat, so if a kid would actually hop up on it, it shuts itself off.
Nice.
Yeah.
Although that thing in Giant is in my way more than it is
All the
helpful
time.
to me.
All the time.
And it actually doesn't do anything.
It's supposed to monitor
I think
spills.
we've hit all possibilities here. I'm waiting for a motion. I'm waiting.
For the purchase?
Yes, please.
I motion for the
Second.
purchase, yeah.
Second.
We have a motion to purchase the presented robotic floor scrubber and a second. Mrs. Martin, will you do the roll call for us, please?
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mrs. Kapka?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
And Mrs. Croft?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll let you know how it goes.
Can I just require that you dress up like Santa every year and ride around the building?
As long as you ride in the seat and not on the scrubber.
That takes us to policy review.
Which is where you wanted to be originally anyway.
Yeah, it only took us another 2 hours.
I know, I'm sorry. My apologies. All right, I'll try to be quick about this piece. Mrs. Hunsinger's gonna join me because.
And Mrs. Hunsinger.
Yep, we're gonna talk about accounting board, governmental accounting standards board policy, so she's the expert there, not me. All right. Yeah, I think I just did, so. All right, so first one is policy on bonding. And again, pretty minor changes to this. We moved some things around. We did look at the school code. Board secretary by school code should be in this policy. So we added that, but not a lot of changes there. Any questions? That's a pretty simplistic one. Okay. Next one is procurement cards, which we currently call credit cards. And we actually don't have credit cards. We have procurement cards. So we went back and changed the policy to make sure that was consistent. So one of the sections that we added was in the purpose that sometimes people get in a situation where something is needed and maybe they can't get a purchase order into the system. I mean, we have tried to make that as electronic as possible, but that the card should provide them a mechanism to do that that gives us an audit trail, an acceptable audit trail, so we're not just skirting practices. So we wanted to make sure that piece was added. Then if we go down to guidelines, second page there under what used to be 0.290, the way we do it here is there is not a credit card agreement, because again, it's not a credit card or a credit card application, because there's not an application, but there's an agreement that we have them sign. And then because Adele is a person who is just really diligent about procedures, she has a written list of procedures that she gives them on what you can and can't do. And so we added that in, that they received their written procedures on the use of their card. And other than that, I think it's just title changes that we've made to this policy.
So these distributed on a as-need basis as opposed to anyone having permanent use of it with few exceptions?
So at the beginning of the policy, it tells you basically that there's a list and that the superintendent approves it. So let me just kind of give you an idea of who those people are. Cabinet, each cabinet member has a card. And then outside of that, it's fairly limited. Director of Technology has a card, because certainly there are things that come up there. Director of Operations, Ken, has a card. Certainly there are things that come up there. One that we will be adding that we didn't have was actually the Food Service Director did not have a card. I can't tell you the number of times we have had to run somewhere and buy something this year because it doesn't come on the Feaser's truck. And that got to be just more trouble than it's worth. So Teresa will be getting a card. Who am I missing?
Principals and the athletic director.
So
And no board members.
Correct, no board members. So it's a pretty limited
Just want to
group.
make sure we all understood that.
That was nice try.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just noticed the other change that we made to this. In the middle of that paragraph, we had it say the bid limit. It's not the bid limit, it's the quote limit. So the quote limit tends to be around $10,000 or $11,000. The bid limit is $20,000. So we want to keep it to that lower amount, so we changed it. That's the way we manage it, is off that quote limit. We just put the wrong word in the policy previously, so we cleaned that up. All right, and I'm gonna stop and let you do the Gatsby policy.
So kind of want to start a little bit with the title of this policy. It's Capital Assets and Gatsby Statement number 34. Gatsby is the acronym for Governmental Accounting Standards Board. That's the regulatory agency that issues standards and statements of how school districts and other governmental entities are to record their financial transactions and how those transactions are to be reported on their audited financial statements. So Gatsby 34 actually went into effect about 20 years ago, and it's very comprehensive. This policy is only dealing with one small section of that entire statement, so don't worry, we're not going to go through all that statement. We're just going to talk primarily about the capital assets, and then I'm going to touch a little bit too on what is called the MD&A, Management Discussion and Analysis. So what we're proposing here is to eliminate this very first sentence in the statement and instead revise it with some language that we thought better clarifies what the intent and purpose of Gatsby 34 is as it relates to capital assets. Further down under definitions, again, we added some more clarifying language about, capital item is a piece of equipment or furniture that has a useful life of more than 1 year. But we also, too, then added in the works of art and historical treasures, because I believe you should know that we did receive a donation of a dinosaur fossil about a year or so ago. Down at the very end of my first page here, under delegation of authority, the second paragraph is where it references the management discussion and analysis. That's a narrative that we write, the government or management writes, and includes in the audited financial statements. That's required by Gatsby 34. It's not a narrative that's developed by the auditors. We write it, they review it. What we're changing here is that we're saying that auditors are going to be reviewing that management discussion and analysis and include it in the audited financial statements. You still, as a board, are approving the audited financial statement. So the way it read originally was like, hey, we're going to hand you just this one piece of information and approve it. No, it has to go with the whole audited financial statement together. And you'll hear more about that management discussion and analysis in October, November timeframe when we provide you with the draft of the audited financial statement. Then on the, under guidelines, again, we're eliminating some of the verbiage and putting in some additional language, or replacing it with language that again clarifies a little bit more about what our process is for identifying capital assets. It's any piece of equipment that's $5,000 or more goes onto our fixed asset inventory list and is reported specifically in the audited financial statements. And we still do capture some of those fixed asset items that are less than the capitalization threshold, but we still need them for insurance purposes. And the only other change I had was almost at the end under donations. We just added in some language that talks about how we are to develop a value for an asset that might not have a historical cost. Just, for example, the dinosaur, we were able to obtain an appraisal on that. That's it. Any questions?
No, thank you very much.
Kiddo?
And then the last policy is the Stabilization Fund policy. So this one's a little bit interesting because we could not find a comparable sample to this. For those of you who don't know, my predecessor, a man by the name of Kim Seldenridge, I actually saw him on Thursday, and I had this policy with me, and I said, I think I know why we did this policy, but I don't know where you got it because I can't find a sample or another example anywhere. And sure enough, remember that chart, that Esser chart I showed you when we were like at $1 million and then we went up to $9 million? Many districts, the district I came from is another example, created out of their reserves, their fund balance, a stabilization fund because we could see that rate going up and we knew what was going to happen. And so the stabilization fund was created exactly by its name to give you the ability to put money aside when you had it, so that as those rates went up and you didn't have as much money and you couldn't just increase your taxes to capture that cost because of the Act 1 index, you had a place to go to sort of pull some money into the budget to, again, stabilize that really big climb that we were going to have to make. So we started with over $7 million, and we're down to under 2 at this point. So we've used a little piece. You saw when I pulled all the budget numbers together, I showed you using about 450,000 of that again next year. Been using just little pieces of it, and again, it's worked perfectly for its intended purpose. But what most districts did was they put the creation of the stabilization fund in their fund balance policy, not as a separate policy. And Mrs. Graff, I'm telling her stuff. You could have probably, I should have called you about this, right? You could have told me how this happened.
Well, I remember the constant warnings that this is only going to last, is only going to soften the initial blow of the growth. That when we're all through it, we're still going to be left with this high payment.
And
I don't necessarily remember why we chose to do this instead of just creating a limited use fund.
And I think, having talked through it with a little bit with Kim on Thursday, and this won't come as any surprise, this is a much more detailed conservative approach to do it this way. So I thought maybe it had come from, GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Organization. A lot of the Gatsby stuff actually that we do came through GFOA, not through, one of the other organizations. But on the PSBA model, which is the model we use, we could not find this policy. Having said that, the Esser Stabilization Fund, it's the only fund we have. So instead of trying to, we sort of, Adele and I had two thoughts, like, do we grab this and try to put it into the fund balance policy? And kind of thought, no, it was established for a reason, the fund's there, we're spending it down. When the funds are spent, then we can decide, do we want to just delete this policy, and if we ever create a stabilization fund for something else, we can go back and do it through the fund balance policy the second time, and that would be our preference. We're just going to leave it alone as it is right now. We changed the titles that needed to be changed and cleaned up the numbers, but anybody who's wondering why it's out there, it was created, I want to say in probably 2010 or 2011, for that very purpose, and just requires us to come, the fund balance policy does not require us to do some of the items under the creation of kind of showing you, how the money's going to be spent, how it's going to be drawn down from year to year, the way this policy does. So just kind of belts and suspenders, forces us to just do a few things, which we've already done. And
And
so,
when will it be all gone?
I'm sorry?
When will it be all gone?
Well, if we can continue to use 400,000 a year, and then within the next couple of years, it'll be gone.
Another 4 years or so.
Any questions? If not, this will be on, these policies will be on next week's consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Z, LCCT.
Yes, ma'am, this is an annual budget, and as part of the 16 districts that partake in the current technical center, and Dr. Stuart Savin is the executive director over there. He's phenomenal. He started 5 years ago, I believe, as the executive director, and just has turned the program around quite a bit. We average about 100 students at the CTC, and that's pretty much split 60-40 between our full-time and our half-time students. Half-time students are usually juniors, and then the seniors go to the full-time program. The CTC budget, the impact to the districts who are participating, they're looking at this year as a 2.74% increase for the contributions to the CTC. That includes capital expenses, operating expenses, things like that. Due to our enrollment, we're actually seeing an increase of 8.4% to our contribution rate. We're gonna go from 1.069 million to about 1.159 million. And the attachment there, they do a real nice job, Dr. Savin and his team. Now, CV accounts for 7.45% of the number of students that are at the CTC. So 7.5%, we pay our fair share is basically what we do. And that's how it's divided out. And it's an average of the last 3 years. So, because you might have a spike, they still take the average of the last 3 to get your contribution rate. So what'll happen next week, we'll ask for a vote in consent. You'll actually fill out a vote, and then Denise will send over the final tally to the CTC, because their board then votes to accept the budget.
Excellent programs they have.
Excellent program.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you want, we can always get a trip out there. Dr. Savin's always willing to say, hey, come see what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
There's a shop at
We should.
Brownstown or anywhere.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, we've had a
I know
couple
we-
of those, and they're really
Yeah.
fascinating.
We'll look at that in the springtime then.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks.
That's all, Madam President.
And another reason I think why we have such good participation is our own tech
Oh, my
program.
goodness, you bet.
It gives these kids a chance to see if there's a program they want. You can't just, pull this out of thin air and say, I want to go into carpentry, or I want to go into metalworking. You have to have a chance for some hands-on, and we feed into it so effectively. Okay, Dr. Mann, next
Oh,
two
one more,
issues.
one
I'm
more
sorry.
thing, Madam President. CTC has actually done a 10th grade kind of experiential program. Are you gonna look at, talk about it?
Well, no, I was gonna say it's welding.
It's in welding, correct. It's in welding. So now we're allowing for there to be a half day
Oh, really?
for 10th graders. I think we have 3 students, or Mike, was it 3 or 5?
I think we have 6 that actually applied, but it's a matter of whether they only have a certain amount of slots across the entire county. And so we'll have to wait to see, they go through the process just like they would any others. They'll look at their grades, their submission, everything they submit, and we'll see if their students get selected or not.
But a great program, getting the kids involved sooner.
Yeah, I think a lot of you don't realize that sometimes students do not get their first choice.
Right.
Which is a shame, but, I'm sure they try to fit them into something that's appropriate for them.
They do.
The irony is, back in the day when I attended,
Yeah,
it was
that's how you
a 3-year program. So it started in 10th grade. So,
You
thank
always find
goodness.
another way to do things. What goes around comes around.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the next two items on the agenda are yours.
Yes, they are. Well, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I haven't seen you, at least haven't been in this position, and welcome, Mark and Mr. Dillman. He's over there. Okay.
He's
Yes.
nodding, he's nodding to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yes, I have two items here. The first item is the new course proposals. What I'm gonna do this is I'll begin by just kind of explaining the process for everyone that's new. Typically this time of year, I will bring to you new course proposals for the high school, if we have any. I mean, there are times where we don't or have very few. And the way that process works is throughout the fall, prior to adjusting from the subject area supervisors, the subject area supervisors and I would meet and discuss and go through looking at what programs need to be updated and changed and so forth, and they would go back to their departments and have a conversation about that. And then we would go through and look at, all right, well, what are the implications across all programming? So with the new model that we have this time with the department chairs, the principals, the high school principals met with the department chairs and they brought forth recommendations, and so they vetted it and then they met with me. And then I went through a process with them and talked through them and asked questions, and we kind of went and vetted it as well. And so it's a little different, and a little different in that, we don't have the same players involved, but the right people are still involved in the process. So I just wanted to share that a little bit with you. So the departments go through and I have a document that they fill out. And basically what you have in front of you here, or that Excel spreadsheet, the document has those titles across the headings there. So they have to go through and provide a title, the course, the duration, the grade levels, the department's anticipated number of students they're looking at, the rationale behind it. Is the course replacing another course, other prerequisites, so it takes them through a process to make sure they're not missing anything as far as the implications of this new course. So they fill out that document, that's what gets submitted to the principals, and then we review that and then bring it forth when we feel that, these are good recommendations. There were others that we got this year, not that they weren't good, we just had some concerns about the timing of them, so we may see them next year. But the ones that I have for you tonight, we feel pretty good about and feel that they are worth exploring and putting into our course selection booklet. So I'll just make some general comments because you have the document in front of you. The first two belong to the physical education department. About 3 years ago, we started updating our high school PE program. We've had a very strong PE program throughout the district, K to 12. One of the things that, under Mr. Trout's leadership, we noticed as he was retiring was that the high school needed to update. While it was very strong, it wasn't like preparing kids for life after high school. And so we looked at adding new courses that are preparing kids for life after high school. So things that they would potentially be involved in. So you see here two examples: adventure sports or fitness programming. Having youngsters develop their own fitness programming under the guidance of the teachers. So again, preparing students more about transition type of programming that students would experience once they leave high school, and hopefully encouraging them to take what they learned into their adult life. So those two courses are part of that whole transition that we started making 3 years ago. Comments or questions about PE? The next one is sculpture. Again, just adding another level of the sculpture 1, sculpture 2. We have, I was kind of surprised we haven't done this before, but we'd like to add sculpture 2. Audio productions is the next course. This is an exciting course. The foundation, as you saw there, provided a very large grant last year that allowed us to do this. The foundation actually provided a very large grant. I forget how many years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah.
That for the program that we had up here, that this is actually replacing. So the foundation has been very, very supportive of our programming up there. And this particular course, we're looking at a level 2. We've had a lot of students express a lot of interest in this, and so we want to continue growing with that. One of the things that we want to continue to develop in this particular area is the career component of this. That looking at, for example, if a student is interested in music, but looking at audio production, what are possible career pathways that they could go through? And we're looking at working with the company out of Lidditz, Rock Lidditz, to see if there are ways that, whether it's shadowing, whether it's internships, whatever it is, to make those connections to show the students the actual authentic application of what they're learning. So this particular course is a level 2 to the current one that we have.
I just want to jump in real quick. Liz Carney invited the foundation over after one of our monthly meetings, and we were able to see the kids in action. So the foundation was able to see the benefits of their donation. So, kudos to Ms. Carney and her students that were there.
Yeah, and the kids are really excited. I mean, it's amazing. The technology is just phenomenal. But it's amazing the excitement that they have, and it's great. I mean, it's just good to be able to provide that type of support and type of training that's going to take them into the future.
Is Rock Lidditz the only like career help or placement that they've considered, or are they considering multiple sources, just out of curiosity? Because even like all the mega churches in the area use audio engineers.
Right. I want to look at as many as possible. I mean, I mentioned Rock Lidditz because it's just an obvious big one.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, because when you think about careers and application, it's all over. So wherever it's applicable, and entering into partnerships with a variety of places makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they all can't fit one place, right? So it makes sense to have multiple places. Okay, fashion, interior, and design. What we did here, one of the things we noticed is that over the years, as things come and go, that we're offering 2 courses, the needle and textile and housing courses. Have kind of lost their momentum and kind of falling out of vogue or whatever you want to call it. But what we did here was we took pieces from each of those courses and developed a new course that was more applicable to today. And again, with a focus on career, looking at different careers when it comes to interior design and having that as the angle of it. The next course is World Mythology and Folklore. Again, looking at different electives for the Social Studies Department, and this is one that coming out of some interest from students and so forth, that Mr. Mayo and his staff decided to take a look at. As you can see here, what they'll be looking at is different, like with mythology and ancient mythology up through contemporary, as contemporary as you can get, but focusing on what that means and how it's applicable to today's world and the implications of it. So I think it's a pretty exciting course. The other nice thing about that particular course is it's open to underclassmen, and we need electives for underclassmen, so that's a nice piece of that. And then the final one is college and high school composition. As you may or may not know, we have a relationship with HAC, and so we have a number of students that can earn college credit through what we call college into high school. There's dual enrollment courses where students can go off campus to HAC or Penn State or whatever and earn credit. But these college and high school courses are courses taught by our staff, certified by HAC to do that. We also have them from the University of Pittsburgh. HAC has been a very good partner over the years, but also very challenging at times. And one of the interesting things here is that we have this 101 and 102. We've been teaching them separately for a number of years. As you can imagine, with us teaching every day, 73 minutes every day, we exceed the number of hours that a HAC student experiences in a regular semester. They don't like that. So what we would do is we would take their content and then we'd add to it we have to comply to their hours. So what we're doing is we're taking these two courses and we're combining them into one to comply to that. Good and bad. The good is that it opens opportunities for students to take other courses. Instead of eating up 2 blocks, it'll fit into 1 block. So we want to continue to do that. We've also started exploring more opportunities with the University of Pittsburgh. They've given us more flexibility than HAC does.
Well, if they take this, will they get credit for both 101 and 102?
Yeah. Yeah,
Fine.
it's interesting.
It's
Say
6
the
credits.
least. That's right. And so the next step to this would be, they would be on the consent agenda next week. So next week when I come to you, I'll bring the course selection booklet along for you to review. And I'll highlight the updates that are in there. Obviously, these would be updates that would be included in there. And we'll go from there. Questions there?
Yes, sir.
So you said this one's for the high school, and just for my own information, so this same process happens with the middle school and also elementary schools?
No, it doesn't. The program in
It's
there.
only for the electives, basically, okay. I just-
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's beyond electives, it's courses. The elementary, we'll talk about programming. So when Dr. Koza comes up and she's talking about the Esser funds, you'll see, she'll give you an example of the ELA and math programming that's much broader, much larger.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the last thing I have is a contract with Frontline. Frontline is a company we have been using for a very long time, predates me. The name of the company then, or the product that we were using from over those years is called My Learning Plan. In the state of Pennsylvania, educators need to earn what's called Act 48 credit, which is a professional development hours. And so My Learning Plan is the tool that we use to manage those hours. So we would, whether it's locally, develop workshops in there, teachers sign up for them. The IU uses it as well. So when teachers complete those workshops, or whether it's here or the IU, the system itself, once they finish their evaluations and other requirements, the system then uploads it to the state so that they get their credit up there. Frontline purchased My Learning Plan or merged with that company, and so they have broader opportunities here. We present that as kind of the backdrop to this. We, as a school district, have to provide what's called mandatory training. So, for example, Title IX, suicide prevention training that staff has to go through ever so often. You know, some of these things are every 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever it is. Frontline is a merged with another company that's offering and providing content. Prior to this, we've kind of piecemealed those programs together wherever we could find it, whether it was with the IU or other vendors. This will give us an opportunity to bring it all under one roof. And Title IX is something we have to do, and so that's what started us looking into this. And with Frontline, what we will be able to do is have those other trainings fit underneath this, which will help facilitate the whole process, because when teachers have to sign up for these things, they would go into My Learning Plan, and so this new system will just talk right to My Learning Plan and upload the credit, so to speak, once it's completed. The other thing that, as a note here, is we've been using a program called Who Knew It? It used to be called Atomic Learning. So those of you who've been around, Atomic Learning is maybe a more familiar term. And again, it's online content that we've purchased. And when we started looking at this Title IX recently, that was one of the first places I went, because it's a vendor we use. Their systems, they're not keeping it up to date. I think they were acquired by another company, and so they weren't interested in playing. So we started looking elsewhere. So my plan is that if we, going forward with this, is we're going to cut ties with Who Knew It, and because some of the content is the same as what's under Frontline, and it makes sense to come in under one umbrella. What we'll need to do is, because we created a lot of local content in Who Knew It, we'll transfer that over, because the Frontline program will allow us to do that as well, create local content. Give you an example. IXL is a program that we implemented this year with reading and math. And when we bring in their trainers, they allow us to record their trainings. So I record their trainings, and then I post them in right now who knew it. Eventually it'll be the frontline program. And so then when we bring on new staff members, we can assign them that training. And then they can get that training, so we're not, having to go back and redo things like that. So we can create a history and provide ongoing training and assign it, and it be asynchronous, so the staff can get to it as they need it. So this approval here would be on the consent agenda next week, so that we can get this in place, so that we can offer the Title IX training for during the February 18th, I think it's the date, the PD that's coming up. Our goal is to get it in place for that, so that so staff can take advantage of it.
Well, in addition to bringing it under one roof and not having to piecemeal it, cost-wise, does it come out neutral? Does it cost more?
Neutral, if not a little
Cost
better.
neutral.
Yeah, it actually comes in a little less,
Oh, okay.
and you get a little more.
Better program for less money. I'll buy that.
You had us at hello.
Okay, thank
Especially
you.
if by a little better you meant 3.3 million that we're short in the budget.
A little, right? A little.
That would be great, yeah.
I get it, it's a software application to track.
Thank you.
Oh, you saved $170.
Dr. Kozer, you have, I think, at least part of the
One
next
question.
two
I just had
items.
off the topic question. When do we approve the calendar for next year? It's just since you're here, when do we do that?
Our first meeting is Wednesday. So the committee, and Dr. Martin's on that committee. So I have 3 meetings scheduled. We meet Wednesday, and then by the end of this month, we'll have a draft that we take to administration, and so you will see it in the beginning of February, or in February.
I was just curious. All right, thank you, appreciate it. Sorry, man.
It's okay.
Well, if you want to.
Okay.
So good evening. This is my first time at the table with our new board members. Great to see everyone. I am Jill Kozer. I'm the assistant to the superintendent for elementary education. And so tonight I have 2 pieces for you. The first is a statement of work with Lancaster Lebanon IU 13. On July 1, PDE changed the law that is in place that's used to evaluate educators, whether it's our classroom teachers, our principals. They did a complete upgrade to the existing legislation. So that's called Act 13. So what we did was we worked with our team to put together the components to get the evaluation process up and running for this school year. We had about July 1, it was released. Teachers came back August 22nd, so it was a fast turnaround. And what we want to do now is we want to come back to the Conestoga Valley core document that really provides the processes and procedures around teacher evaluation. And the last time this document was updated was 2013. So again, we've made a shift now with the state in the evaluation system, and we want to take some time and really go in more depth with a group of stakeholders from all levels of the organization to make those tweaks and those upgrades. And so we are proposing to contract with IU 13. Dr. Jennifer Reinhardt is just an experienced facilitator in teacher effectiveness and principal effectiveness. So it's kind of that effect of having the neutral, objective, outside facilitator who would come in, work with a group of administrators, teachers, stakeholders to really do a deep dive into our supervision plan and make sure that we have that ready to go for the next school year. Questions on this piece?
I'm going to move on to Esser Grant, and you and Mrs. Hardy Fresher are going to do this one, right?
Yep. Don, we're good. In addition to working with the elementary schools, looking at some of the K-12 educator effectiveness pieces, one of my other roles is overseeing the federal programs piece for the school district. And so in your board orientation, we'll talk about what that means, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. We'll go through some of that. But the other piece in federal programs this year is the Esser funding. And so just to give our new board members, kind of bring you up to speed on where we are, we have worked through before I came to the district in June, so I'm in my first year with our new board members as well. But when I got here, we had gone through the process of looking at Esser 1, the first round of funding that came from the federal government. Since I've been here, we've created the spending plan for Esser 2, Esser 3, which is also known as the American Rescue Plan, ARP Esser. And then there's another federal grant that was actually Esser money that came from the federal government to the state government that got set aside and passed to school districts. So we actually have 4 different Esser funding sources. And so we've been gathering input on the spending plan for months. We've been gathering it through Phyllis's presentations to the board along the way. We've had meetings with our administrators, and we've been putting together this spending plan. So at the community forum on November 15th, anyone who attended up at Brownstown, we gave you that proposed plan and shared what we were thinking about just for that Esser 3. So that's what you're looking at tonight, is the outcome of the forum, and then we put out a community survey, and we wanted to just come back to the board and close the loop and share with you what we found in that survey and how it lines up to the final Esser plan that we submitted. And so that first slide really walks you through those different Esser funding sources. Esser 1 was spent this year. It's signed, sealed, delivered. What we were working on was putting together the 2, the 3, and then you see that set aside. That's the money that came from the federal government to the state government, and the governor had to set aside some of those funds for the school. So there's the 3 funding sources that we were working with in assessing the needs of the district and planning for those moving forward. So we put out our community survey, and we had 226 responses. And so you can see on the graph, the majority of our responses were parents and community members, which was really great to see their feedback. And so we went through all 226 responses, great feedback and comments and suggestions that were in there as well. But what we did for you today is we just compiled the ranking of the pieces that were chosen as the highest priorities. So from our respondents, when they voted for top priority, this should be number 1, here's how their responses broke down. And so you'll see that the piece on the academics, the high quality academics, the ed tech, we have our system of scaffolded supports, and then our supported learning environments, which kind of encompasses that social emotional learning, SEL, that we talk about, and then also the pieces around improving our facilities. So you see, get a visual there of what the survey respondents said. And then our next slide takes us through how we had put together our plan for ARP Esser. And again, this is just that one grant, okay? In a minute, I'm gonna show you how all the funding sources work together. But for the ARP Esser grant, the way that it landed is the majority of that grant is going to the facilities improvements. And so let me kind of walk you through how we got there, right? We had Esser 1, and we used that to really hit the ed tech piece and get the devices in kids' hands that we needed and start focusing on some of those academic pieces. Esser 2 and that set aside that I was telling you about, we dedicated a lot of those resources to the academics, to the supportive learning environments, and so we really put the student-centered learning pieces into those grants. So by the time we got to this last piece of funding, it really freed up the opportunity to take a look at how we could bring some of these facilities repairs into the Esser funding. And so Phyllis can give you a little bit more information of what that looks like.
Whoop, we'll go back. So we're gonna go to a slide in a couple minutes that kind of list some of those facilities improvements that we talked about. But I think in addition to, what Dr. Kozer said is, even though this may look a little bit out of line when we show you, the survey results versus where the funding's going, when you try to pull it and take a look at, oh, but wait, we've already spent money on some of these other areas and look at it in total, you're gonna find that facilities improvement one as a total is much less of a percentage. So I'll go through the specifics when we get to that. But the reason, a couple of reasons why we focused on the facilities improvements in ARPS are, one, it just was a big pot of money, right? So, to some extent, you have to be good stewards of the dollars and say, I'm not gonna spend money on, smaller items, that it doesn't make sense to spend money just to spend money. We need to spend it where we need it. Secondly, we did, again, from the community forum, we talked about the things that we looked at in determining that. Is it something that we can do once? And so it's not something we're putting in the budget that needs to be sustainable year after year. Does it align with our district goals? Is it something we were going to do anyway? Again, to be good stewards of the dollars and make sure we're spending them where we really need them. And so at the end of the day, when we looked at those funds, one of the driving factors was the master facilities plan that we have in place. And knowing that, we had really two choices. Is we could choose to spend this money on some other things. What that would mean then, we would have to put more millage in place to feed that debt service that we would need to finish the projects. Or conversely, we use some of the Esser funds, and it's totally allowable expense, use some of the Esser funds for that project expense, and then hopefully we can finish the projects that we have on the table, and maybe we even have some room to, do the next project, or even if we do nothing more than stop there, we've at least put ourselves in a position where we've tried to use some money towards that debt service and then not had to raise taxes for that expense later.
Was Esser's a blank check, or was it designed for emergency funding?
So if you
For
remember in the presentation, we had those couple of slides of allowable uses. And so when Esser 1 came up, the allowable uses were, I'm going to call them now I'm in your world, but a little bit more narrow. So it was really about, COVID-related items. So devices, PPE, and we did spend a significant amount. I mean, most of it, as Dr. Kozer said, was getting up on the one-to-one so that if we had to go to remote learning, not only did the kids have the devices, but the teachers had the equipment to be able to teach that way. But we did spend a fair amount on PPE and hand sanitizers and cleaning and masks and, all sorts of things. So, we had that component as well. When Esser 2 came out, the coronavirus response Esser came out, they broadened the scope and added some more items to it and allowed you to use Esser for, some existing staffing and, some, again, just broader, more global uses. Then by the time Esser 3 came out, the response really became, you need to sort of take a step of looking at anything that would be related to preparing, preventing, and responding to COVID. And so I wouldn't say it was a blank check, but they tried to give you some flexibility and some room to move. In our particular case, it really, we were sometimes it's just being in the right place at the right time. We were in the right place at the right time, that we had that master facilities plan in place. It just so happens that the buildings, the components of two of the buildings that we're working on happen to be HVAC renovations. And the nice part about those renovations is, while we can say they prepare, prevent, and respond to coronavirus, they also prepare, prevent, and respond to any type of communicable disease. So, and not just communicable diseases, but like allergies too. So, it's going to help us with indoor air quality, help us with flu mitigation, help us with, if we get mold spores, we know we've had that in the past in some of our buildings. So it's really a solid program to be able to do those types of renovations with these funds, and certainly an allowable use for them as well.
So when you look at focus on high quality academics, how does that focus on COVID-related activities?
Yeah, well,
we'll get
go
there
to the next
in one
slide, I think
second
will
here.
help.
Next slide.
So this slide is actually then all of the Esser grants put together, so you can see it balances things out a little bit more. But again, those top 3 areas on the survey were the facilities. They were the high quality.
I can see how facilities prevents COVID.
Right,
the
HVAC
get
renovations,
that. I get that.
This is more learning loss.
Yep.
That's what you're
So,
looking at.
Dr. Z, if you want to go to that next slide, we'll start digging into those top 3 areas. So
All right.
the survey said Oh, I just feel like Family Feud there. And the survey said these three areas were the highest priority for the community,
You're
right?
dating yourself, you know.
I am.
And the community was aware what they were voting on, correct?
Yes.
They weren't just,
We
this
have,
is what I
We
want.
went through it at the
Right.
community
Yeah,
forum.
I know, I was at
Yeah,
the community
we-
forum,
yeah.
and we
I just wanna
put
make sure
that slideshow up with the plan and the different buckets, we call them, of
And that was in the
expenditures.
survey as well,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure that when you get this kind of money, I'm assuming someone's gonna come around and audit,
Oh, yeah.
assuming,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Yes.
And just wanna make sure that your buckets are good
Yeah.
and you have a good story to,
Well, to that
Tell.
point, not only are they gonna audit it, we have found out as we've gone through this process, there have been a lot more hoops to jump through on the front end than so the state uses a system called e-grants, and that's the system we go in and apply for our grants. They kind of tell us what the allocation is, you have to go through the application process, and then they approve it. In both Esser 2 and Esser 3, there have been additional components that we have had to complete.
That were
So in
added.
Esser 2, we had to, I can't even think what that,
The construction sheet?
no, that was 3. The one we just did on the 10th, when they came back and said, you need to
That's
do
the
this
same
last
thing.
piece.
They put the construction sheet into Esser 2, but it
Okay.
wasn't originally in Esser 2, so they, yeah.
And then in Esser 3, they had, again, this secondary piece strictly for the construction that we had to put in advance of putting the actual application into e-grants. So I fully expect that if they would see, Mike, where there was something that kind of didn't line up, that they're gonna flag it on the front end. We're not even gonna get that far. And one of the reasons we wanted to get the applications in is so if they do that, we can then come back to you and say, well, that plan that we talked about,
Yeah.
guess what? We're not gonna be able to do this piece of it, so now we're gonna have to kind of retool.
okay.
I think everyone recognized early on that you can't allow the money to be spent and then approve it.
Correct.
I mean, that would become a nightmare, and there would have been inconsistencies, you can be sure, but this seems to have all the safeguards that we need to be assured that we're in compliance.
Okay. I just don't wanna go back and say we did a community survey and this is how we spent our funding.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see
I-
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my justification too,
Yeah.
I did a survey, these parents said that
Yeah.
facility
And so
was the
this
number
is
one
what we
thing,
did.
and it's like, okay.
Can I ask one thing? There is also, and I can't remember hearing much about it, there also was a Pennsylvania governor's emergency thing. Where is that money?
That's the, when I was talking about that set aside, we call it the
Yeah.
set aside grant, that's exactly what that is, yep.
Okay.
And that one
We
does
never seem
have,
to make much of
yep,
an ordeal about that, but it was a decent amount of money too.
yeah, yeah,
We got
it
about
was.
500,000, we got about
Yeah,
$500,000.
$500,000.
Now, that one came with very specific stipulations, and it is all the academic opportunities. It's a summer program, an after-school programming.
Yeah.
It was very specific to
It was an
academics.
educational program.
Mhm,
Okay, I always wondered just where was that money being applied in lieu of all of this?
Mhm,
Okay,
yeah,
thank
it's that fourth source
Yeah,
of ESSER funds
okay.
that came late in the game. That one came in October, I believe. It came late in the game, so.
Yeah.
It came the latest and had the earliest application
Mhm.
deadline.
Yeah, but it's called the Governor's Emergency Educational something. I
Yeah.
forget what
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. So then these three
Yeah, if we go
slides,
Back up one slide. There
this
we go.
is exactly the same information for the existing board members. I mean, this has not changed from what we presented on November 15th. So we're sharing it again so our new board members have a chance to see. But this is what we have proposed in those top 3 survey categories. So there's our list of facilities, and you can see it's like Phyllis said, it's all around HVAC and air quality and those types of improvements in the middle of the pandemic here.
And the 2 biggest ones are the 2 at the bottom. And you know, Wes just came and talked about the plan con for the existing middle school, the new Smoketown, in Leola. So we're in, you know where we're at in process with that. The HVAC component only of those 2 projects is what's referred to there.
Yep, and then here, Mike, here's your high quality academics, okay? So this is where it's our big opportunity. to take a look at that K to 8, we call it Tier 1, that means in the classroom, the core classroom. This is where we're gonna look at our ELA resource, and then our math resource, and then the third year, our science resource. So it is a fantastic opportunity to update the materials and the resources that are in teachers' hands across the board.
How does that prevent an outbreak?
It doesn't prevent an outbreak, but it addresses the learning loss, and it's PDE has
Okay.
developed what's called an accelerating learning system. So our goal now is, we don't want to focus on that loss and that deficit. We want to move everybody. We want to push everybody as fast as we can to get
So what you want to
them
sell is that we
back on track.
went backwards because of the COVID. This is gonna help bring it forward from a learning piece of it, is what you're selling.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
So then that also includes some of the other specific programs, assessments, and then some of the CVVA supports that we were able to add in as well with this funding.
And the beauty of it is, as Jill said, we have this opportunity to do this. The reality is, if we didn't have the ESSER funds to do this, we would have to do this work eventually anyway. So again, it's a matter of, here's an opportunity for us and for us to set ourselves up for the years to come in having this stuff available, and so it's not gonna hit the regular general fund budget.
Okay.
Okay, so supportive learning environments. So this one we just wanted to call your attention to, because in our pie chart, it's not a very big piece of the pie. And the community survey said, hey, we really need some pieces around social emotional learning, mental health. And so this is what we have proposed, and this is what we will be putting into the ESSER plan, but it still wasn't a big piece of the pie. So that next slide then shows you why. Because we also have received some other funding sources in the social and emotional learning realm and the supportive learning environments, that because we had funds in these areas, we didn't need to rely on the ESSER money. So we wanted to really make sure that our community, our stakeholders understand that we see that priority, we know it is significant, but we don't necessarily have to use the ESSER funds, because we also have other grants that have come out recently that we are putting toward this work in the district.
Capital? You can do capital, correct? Like a floor scrubber might prevent COVID?
You can. You can do some equipment.
Like anything cleaning related?
Yes,
And
you can
we
do that
actually-
equipment.
We actually had the floor scrubber that you approved in this list, but we spent all the money before we got to it, so. Something had to give somewhere along the line.
And it was a floor scrubber.
We actually didn't think we would do the floor scrubber until, from a cleaning perspective, we were like, well, why would we use that? And then as the labor issue has come up, now it's made more sense to us.
And when you have a cost, a chart, such as if we had to clean an elementary school or whatever, et cetera, do you have a special accounting code that all those costs go to, and then it gets linked to all this stuff from an auditing perspective?
Yes.
So then that last slide, I
There's
just.
too many codes.
Yeah, I know it's a pretty long code.
Yeah.
Codes for everything.
Dr. Z, I just wanted to show our board members, if you wanted to go back and see any of that information, again, the new team members, this is not the only time we've had these discussions with the board. We've really been putting this information out there, getting feedback, getting input. And so, the official survey was in November, but we had formed that plan since March with getting input from our stakeholders on what those priorities were. So again, wanted to close the loop for you, show you where that survey landed and how it really impacted the plans we put in place.
You said you got 226 responses. Was that more or less than you were expecting?
That's probably about right on. Yeah. I was really happy to see that number of parents, almost 50% of the respondents were families. So that means that some of the communication methods we use, we were getting that message out there to families. But that was it was good to see.
I felt that to be a higher number than I would have expected from past surveys that we did. Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, also posted is our board agenda for next month, or next week. If you have any questions. If not, this is the second opportunity for public comments. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board? If not, are there any board matters to be brought up? I will mention one, we still have some need for some of these assignments. If you will review those to see if there's something else you're willing to do to fill in the blanks there.
Rumor has it Mr. Dillon was interested in the construction committee.
Okay.
I heard that too.
I heard that through.
I would be willing to confirm that rumor.
You can imagine what we'd have assigned you if you weren't here at all.
Yes. And policy review.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have one right now for that, but we're going to. We have a lot of,
We have-
especially,
I think we went through them beforehand in December, and we signed a whole bunch of them, then we had some, the ones that we did not, just allow the new folks to take a look at some.
yeah, I will.
The gaps.
Yeah, I'll get out just what the blanks are. If that's all we have right now, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session for legal and personnel reasons.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for that adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? If not, we are adjourned.
All right, Phil, let's see what we got here.